at 5:30, and I'll go ahead and call this budget workshop to order. The Grayson County Board of Supervisors, May 3rd, 2022. Mr. Smith, if you wouldn't mind leading us in the invocation and the pledge, please.
Father, thank you for the day that allows us to be here in Grayson County. Thank you for all the work that's been done. We pray that you would just be our board tonight, as well as the board of the county, just make sound decisions.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Maybe sit. You do have a copy of the agenda with you. As you could be mindful of the decorum that's located at the bottom of the page. First, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a change under new business. We currently have a public service authority issue reference water maps that I think it was at the last meeting I actually asked for it to be brought to us, but we have a PSA meeting scheduled for next Thursday, so I'd like to see that just moved to the PSA agenda and not on the budget workshop.
Okay, so that being the order of a motion to...
Motion to table that till Thursday, 12 May PSA meeting.
Okay. Second that motion. Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving the agenda with that amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I also aye. Okay. Next, we had the Board of Supervisors minutes for March the 10th and the work session for March 29th, which we were sent in our agenda or meeting packet. I would assume everybody's had a chance to review those. Entertain a motion for the acceptance of those minutes. If there's
Just one thing, take them maybe separately, because I was at the March 10th meeting, but not at the 29th, vice versa for Supervisor Ivy, so
okay.
I'll probably abstain from the one that I wasn't at.
Okay. With the Board of Supervisors minutes for March the 10th.
Make a motion we approve.
Okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Okay. I also
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't here. So.
Okay, I understand. So, Mr. Ivy will abstain from that vote. Okay, next, the budget workshop of March the 29th with 3 members here in attendance at that meeting. Would entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from the budget meeting.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Table those till next meeting. Okay. Need a motion to, well, since that motion didn't carry, would you like to make a motion to table those to the next meeting?
I make a motion to table the approval of the budget meeting minutes of March 29th to the next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on that matter? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move forward. All in favor signify by saying aye. I also aye. 4-0. Okay. All right. Larry Bolt, Commissioner Revenue with the elderly disabled tax relief presentation. Good to have you with us.
Thank you all. I think I'm just going to recap a little bit and to catch us back up. I made the presentation at the regular April meeting about everything that was going on with our tax relief for elderly disabled. And at the end of my presentation, especially in light of reassessments this year, I made a proposal to change some guidelines for this year. And specifically, it was the household gross income guideline from $27,500 to $30,000, which was an increase of $2,500. The net worth, which is currently at $90,000, increase of $10,000 up to $100,000. And the maximum amount of tax relief from $250 up to $275, which was $25 increase. And I made mention that probably the maximum amount would be if you're just gonna change one without the others, that would be the one to concentrate on. But anyway, so at that meeting, I was asked to provide some more information. And then at the last budget workshop, and whenever that was in April, I presented more information and went over it and did not have any questions, and here we are. So we maybe, if anyone has a recommendation based on what we've presented, or questions, or we want to approve something tonight.
Yeah, I make a motion, we accept your recommendation for the adjustments.
I know I sort of got a hint that maybe some of you wanted to do a little bit more, but, just talking about I got a hint, but,
I'll rescind my motion.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss it a little bit. I think it's a really good program that the county has. It helps the people who need it most in this county. And I think what Larry's asking, the commissioner's asking for is there's probably more room there to help that project out. As I recall, last meeting we talked about, we always go up, but we've never gone down on it and putting some boundaries around that. I don't know that we've had enough discussion. I support an increase. I guess being this is my first time going through a budget session, is there a chance we can revisit this later in the budget discussion to see where we may add some more benefit, or leave it at the request, or not do it at all, Mr. Chairman? So,
Do we have another workshop scheduled for?
There's one scheduled for the
24th.
24th.
24th is what I was thinking.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
do you have you need to get this out by a certain time?
we could make that timeline work. As to, if you say at the other later date meeting, whenever you said, something pretty good, that would be fine. And I would say on my estimate or my recommendation, I've tended to be pretty conservative based on maybe prior years, and we only probably ever jumped up $25 at a time. When I said 250 to 275, it was 225 before that.
And I think, if I may, that particular one, what's the category for that? Is that personal property? What's the 275 recommendation?
This is real estate.
Real estate.
The elderly, disabled, that's on our tax relief
Right,
have to meet
right.
these guidelines, and that would be the maximum amount of tax relief they could receive.
Would be 275.
Right.
Okay.
If you all decided 300, for example, it would be 300. Right now, it's 250.
Mr. Chair,
yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
would it be out of line if we just went with that tonight with I'm in support of an increase. The 300 sounds pretty reasonable, but if you wanna beat it around some more, since we've gotta figure out what we're spending and we already know that's gonna be that, I mean, I'm all for that.
So I'm in favor of increasing this project. I think that what we're asking for is we could probably do a little more, but if you want to approve it tonight with the opportunity to maybe help it out a little more at the end of this, I mean, we've still got a lot of stuff to talk about. But I am in support of your request, and you, as far as I'm concerned, you did request enough. So.
Well, and I said I probably was conservative to start with on that, but, you know, seeing how, you know, in reality, I think 300 would be a good amount. That's a pretty good jump from 250 to 300. And we were, you know, I gave you the thing about where we were talking about the levy, what it's at, if it comes down to different ones, and what the amount that would go up by different numbers, and an extra $50 would really help that.
So, now you got me off. Now, the timeline though, if what Supervisor Ivy's suggesting is that we discuss it some more, think about it, kick it around after maybe we already have a better picture of what the finances are gonna look like. In reality, this doesn't really affect anything until the fall when you send the tickets out, right? So.
In reality, I would have to know something September.
Yeah, but I mean, by the end of the budget cycle, we should be able to
Right.
pass this once we have a full
Right.
understanding, and that might give us a better picture. I think that's what you're saying, right? We'll have a better picture of what we might
As
be
long
able
as
to
we make it
do.
effective for,
And then it would be
tax year
effective when the
2022.
budget takes effect on 1 July. This would be passed in accordance in
it
along
would
with
be
that.
for this year's taxes that
Correct.
comes out this fall.
Correct. Is that,
Mr. Chair, what? Go ahead, Mr. Chair. And I apologize, because this is my first budget season, and there's a ton of stuff we have to talk about, but this one in particular is kind of struck me that it was, we're gonna help. Given the situation we're in, we don't know where the levy's gonna be, and we don't know any of that yet, and we've got a strange year right now. I think that's a program we ought to look at and support, maybe even a little better than the request was. So that's the only angle I'm coming from. If I'm slowing the process up, I'm fine with Pat. Yeah, I'm fine with a motion to approve for tonight, but I'd like for us to revisit it.
Well, that's where I was headed. I was gonna say, we can go ahead and make the motion tonight, go for the $300. That seems to be reasonable, but I'm still open to, if we're gonna discuss it, and it may go more than 300 is the thought, because I know this is a vulnerable population.
That's where I'm.
But if we went 300 tonight, then we would know where we're at with the other stuff.
You're
I
not-
think
you're
it's a
not-
big impact.
I'm sorry,
It's not
Mr. Chairman.
big. Okay, go ahead.
It's more of a,
You're not gonna get a fight out of me on this. I just publicly support the program. I think it needs to be supported. And
Well, I'm supporting what you said.
right. So if you
All
want
right,
to pass
we're
it
done.
tonight and we go forward, I'm fine. With it.
Yeah, either, I mean, I can make a motion if we go to 300, and, if you're entertaining a motion, Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
okay, we have a motion before the board, is there a second?
I'll pass. I think I need a
All right.
second.
All right, any further discussion?
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Just to be clear on what the motion was, did we include about the household income going up from 27.5 to 30?
No, I don't think that was addressed.
Yep. Could I amend it?
Well, I'm just saying, I was just trying to be clear too, if it was a household income going up from 27.5 to 30,000, the net worth from 90,000 to 100,000, and the maximum relief from 250 to 300.
Okay.
That was sort of, I guess, mine.
I don't think you'd have to amend the motion. I think we could have an amendment to the motion that could be brought forward, and then
Okay.
if you want to add that amendment.
Yeah, I would like to amend it to include, as Commissioner Revenue stated, with the income guidelines
Okay,
I still second that.
okay,
And net worth.
and net worth.
okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take the amendment comes first, correct?
correct.
Yeah. All right, with the amendment to the original motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Also aye. Okay, now to the original motion. Everyone in favor signify by saying aye. Also aye.
All right.
And thank you from my viewpoint, thank you for everyone, all our citizens that's on this, because it's a really good program. Thank you.
Thank you.
But, Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yes,
I
sir.
do think though, that, no, you don't, I don't want to give you the opportunity to speak again.
I'll remember that.
You resemble that remark?
I resemble that.
If we could, maybe an action item for budget closeout, to relook this particular item to see if there's further adjustments we can make. All right? So if you want that in a motion, I'll do it.
Sure.
So I'd like to make a motion that we revisit the elderly disabled tax release plan during budget closeout for possible further review, further refinement.
Okay. Have a motion before the board. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Also aye. Okay, which brings us down to the budget workshop with Corbin Stone, with Robinson, Farmer, and Cox financial forecast.
Good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Somebody can just put their thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, great. You might not want to hear me, but so you can put me on mute if anything is hurtful. First off, we've been working on the financial forecast, and I think the goal tonight is to kind of show you a little bit of that so you get an idea of how it's going to flow. Going forward, I'd like to get a draft out to everyone prior to the May 24th meeting to give you guys, the board members, a chance to reach back to me and say, all right, if we make an adjustment here or there, how does it impact the forecast? And then when I show up on the 24th of the meeting, we can kind of go over those adjustments and ultimately how they're going to drive the numbers. A couple of things right out of the box that I think is good for the county. Number one, you had a healthy fund balance last year. Ended the year with about $8.5 million in unassigned fund balance in the general fund. That's above the minimum we would recommend. And actually it climbed a little bit between 19 and 21. We still expect a little bit more of an increase going into or ending 2022 because you receive these ARPA funds, and they should drive your fund balance a little bit higher or your available reserves a little bit higher. The other good news is that you have low debt, about $12 million in the last set of financial statements. So going into what we might be going into in terms of inflation, you're in a good spot. You're in a good place to be. So it gives you the opportunity not to make knee-jerk reactions or have knee-jerk reactions to anything that comes at you. Other items to note, though, you do have kind of a low to decreasing population. We think about government, at least the way I think about it. I think about spreading the cost of government over all your employees, your citizens. And when you have a low or a decreasing population, that becomes a strain. Particularly, we see it a lot in small towns in Southwest Virginia as they have a declining population. The easy way to think about it is if you've got streets you've got to maintain and you had 5,000 residents and you drop to 4,000, then those towns are having to spread those costs over fewer residents. So the incremental cost to each resident goes up. There's no real increase in assessed values outside of reassessment years. And what that means is not a whole lot of new construction going on. And this most recent, assessment that we're looking at now has got a big increase, and that's been driven by some rather odd factors. So we don't know that that's going to continue. Rising interest rates, which is what we're dealing with right now, typically drive down asset prices. So typically when you have a rising interest rate environment, asset prices, whether they're bonds or equities or real estate, typically are driven down somewhat. And it's on everybody's radar. Where is this inflation going? How much are we going to be dealing with in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? I'm of the opinion that we've had a pretty strong move in inflation. I think the Federal Reserve will get that straightened out through raising interest rates. I don't know how long that's going to take. But the concerning part for me is that we've raised the base. So we've taken, a $15 million budget and we've increased it by 6 or 8%. And that 6 or 8% increase in 1 year or a year and a half or 2 years is going to continue with you forever. I don't really see inflation abating, so I don't think this is going to be transitory in that I don't expect it to go back down. Much of it's driven by wage inflation, and we just don't see many people going to their employees and saying, I know we gave you a big raise this year, next year we're going to give you a negative raise. So I would expect that inflation to, at least that base increase, to stick around. And what I'm going to do now is try to share my screen so you can get an idea of what the forecast is. So when this draft comes out and you start looking at it, you can understand what we've done and kind of why we've done it. And I'm going to wind up sharing several screens. But basically, this is a screen here. You should be looking at 5 years worth of data here, and these are, CPI, various factors, and we're scheduling that out. Most of these are unique to the county. CPI, I think, is the only one that is not unique to the county. And then, based on this information, this historical rates of increase, we generate essentially a way of projecting revenues and expenditures into the future. As I scroll down, you can see that's kind of the historical data. We have 25 factors there. We added some additional ones just for anything unusual that might be going on. So you can see down here we have number 28, which is one of importance, and that's declining inflation. Because inflation is not trending the way it has, and CPI is not trending the way it has in recent years. So factor 28, when you see that in the forecast, you'll know we're going to this declining inflation factor, which expects 4% inflation essentially next year, the year after 3%, and then declining to 2.5%, 2.2%, 2.17%, and 2.13%. I'm going to try to share a different screen.
Yes,
Okay.
Hey Corbin, John Van here for a quick question on the inflation item.
Yes, sir.
So you're, in the chart, you show declining inflation, but in reality, inflation is going up, and I'm just struggling with the word decline versus.
Right, I think it's going up right now. I think in the fiscal year ending 2023, we're expecting inflation of about 4% for that fiscal year. So ignoring the inflation that's already increased, declining from this point is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And then the following year after that, the fiscal year ending 2024, we think inflation is going to be about 3%, and then we ultimately think it's going to trend back at its historic levels. But that's certainly something we can adjust in the forecast.
Right.
Because, at the end of the day, if you're more comfortable with an inflation factor of 5% for 2024, I'm happy to make that adjustment because, I'm certainly not going to tell you I can guarantee that we're only going to have inflation of 4% in fiscal year 2024, or 3% in fiscal year 2024, and 4% in 2023.
And maybe that all makes sense, and I understand your approach there, but I guess I'm hung up on the word declining versus just using the category of inflation. You think inflation is going to be X for this fiscal year, it's going to be Y for the next FY. Why declining versus?
Yeah, we could probably say the accountants anticipated inflation, or anticipated inflation is probably a better. The reason I put declining is because we had a projection of inflation based on historical data, and that was coming in at 2%, 2.3%.
Yeah, I got you.
And that's just not, it's just not a reality.
Okay,
So
I understand the approach. Thanks.
Yes, sir. So you should be seeing now kind of your base. You got a base year budget here, and then we're projecting out forecasted revenues for year 1, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, and of course 2028. The one reason I highlighted this personal property current tax row here is because the assessment looks like it's going to be about $4.2 million. That's at a rate of $2.25. Of course, if you adjust that rate, the number could go down. And right now in the budget, it's showing just under $3.8 million. So if you stay with a 2.25 rate, I would expect this revenue to actually be quite a bit higher. This is just giving you an example of what essentially the revenues are forecasted out as, and each tab down here is a different group of revenues. So the next one is just going to be other local taxes. And then those factors, going back to that first page I showed you, that's just how we're projecting those revenues to grow over time. The next thing is just an expenditure projection. You can see here, the 27 factor is a flat. We're not going to have an increase there, so I'm not giving you guys any sort of raise over the next 5 years. You can see that compensation for the board of supervisors stay the same over that period of time. As you come down to county administration, we're using 28, which is that declining inflation, or really our projected inflation rate. For personnel costs, for fringe benefits, we're actually allocating those a little bit higher than inflation, 1% higher than inflation. The reason being, healthcare costs just keep going up. The other reason being, we would expect an increase in VRS for two reasons. Number one, salaries are going up, so we would expect over a longer period of time that obviously your retirement is based on the salary you had when you were still working. So salaries go up, retirement liabilities are going to go up. The other thing, as interest rates go up, investments typically go down, or asset prices go down. So we would expect VRS to need to raise rates, or to raise the rates they charge you to make up for any declines in their investments as well. Or just not the anticipated growth that they expect, which I believe right now they expect about a 7.5% annualized return on their investment. So that gives you an idea on the expenditures, how we do that. Hopefully everybody can see that screen. We're not having any problems there. I'm going to try to show you another screen real quick.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
do we have access to those files other than just looking at it on the TV?
I looked on the packet, I didn't see it.
Yeah, this is tough.
Yeah, it is. There's strange.
We'll have a printout for you here in the next week or so,
Okay.
and we'll circulate that to everyone.
Are your pages numbered, maybe where we can put a reference down to the pages you referenced in your presentation?
Yeah, what I will do is I'll have exhibits, and what I'll do is say these are the exhibits I talked about during the presentation. So then you can go through. But when we send out the presentation, I'll kind of walk you through essentially this same presentation again.
Okay, thank you.
And right now you're looking at something. Well, I'm going to go to the projects tab, and basically these are kind of the long-term capital outlays right now that we're expecting. We pulled them out of your budget because we want to forecast revenues and expenditures, just operating revenues and expenditures, and then we're going to show this project summary. The one thing that I noted is the fire and rescue capital needs.
Mr. Stone.
We estimated those out at $1 million a year, and these are in thousands. So hopefully everyone can see the screen, but we kind of projected those needs out at $1 million a year. That may be an adjustment you can make. You can change that to maybe every other year as you replace fire and rescue vehicles. Because just looking at it, that is having an impact on the forecast.
Hey, Corbin.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ivey was still having issues seeing it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't.
Corbin, if you could zoom that in a little bit, make it about 50% bigger, please.
You bet.
Right there.
Is
That's
that-
good.
that
Yeah.
help?
We're getting there.
Okay.
75%.
Yeah, there you go.
I can see. Sorry.
All right, thank you, sir.
No, appreciate it, because I couldn't be.
And absolutely, and I'll try to blow up the next one as I go through it as well. But we just list out, it says project summaries, it's really projects and major capital outlays. And you can see right now we're estimating about $1 million a year just make sure you realize this is in thousands on this sheet. So about $1 million a year in fire and rescue capital needs. Like I was saying, that may be something you can kind of adjust in the forecast to help you out a little bit. If you don't think you're necessarily going to need $1 million every year, although those fire trucks and rescue squads are very expensive. Then we kind of summarize all this. I'm gonna blow this up so you can see it a lot better. How's that?
There you go. Much better, thank you.
Okay. So this we're starting, I'm just gonna highlight sales and kind of walk through it. But this we're starting with basically what we think beginning cash in the general fund is gonna be. This is your budget as it stands right now, your operating budget. It excludes any capital need. And then we have your expenditures down here, basically summarized by major function. And of course, the difference between the two is either a surplus or a deficit. And the thing I mentioned earlier was that you guys were starting with a strong cash position in your general fund. So you can see you've got a deficit down here, and you have an ending balance that is lower than that beginning balance. But it's not that critical range that we would get concerned about. I'm just kind of showing you all this. The next year, the deficit is not as great, and that's because right now in the budget that was actually provided earlier today, you've got a $310,000, I think, contribution to, I want to say, a tech center of some sort that member serves, and we show that falling off in year two. If that's a continuing expense, then that deficit is going to, it's going to grow by about $310,000 each year.
Could you repeat what you just said?
I said if that's a continuing contribution, then the deficit is going to increase in this number here. Right now, we have it falling off after the first year, but this deficit would increase if that's continuing. And let me make this a lot larger here. Okay, so those deficits from that previous page, we bring those over to the summary page, and we show the forecasted beginning cash, the deficit, the capital needs for this year, and ultimately the deficit we would expect to see, and finally the ending cash balance, if you will. And we do that for, of course, this 5-year forecast period. Your budget column, we don't change. If you change the tax rate, then we'll change that budget column. I think right now this budget column is based on a 56-cent tax rate. And again, the personal property taxes are well below the assessment that you would have if you stay with the $2.25. So, a lot of that deficit that you see there could be wiped out by a larger tax rate and staying with the 2.25 personal property tax. As you come down further, you can see that really in year one, this year and next year, all things being said, if everything held up like we expected to, we wouldn't have to have a tax increase. You could leave it at 56 cents, and you wouldn't have a tax increase through 2024. In 2025, though, you would have an 8-cent tax increase. And then next year, you would have a 7 cents, so the cumulative tax increase would be 15 cents. And then you would have a penny tax increase out here in year 5. Now, the one thing we do with these forecasts is we drill it down to one decision. So what's that tax rate going to be? So you make all the other decisions, put those into your budget, whether your personal property tax rate is going to be 2.25 or what have you. And then we drill it down to the default is what does our real estate tax rate need to be to make all this work? You can see if I come down here and change that tax rate from 56 to say 59, that reduces the increase, it kind of pushes it out a little bit, and the cumulative increase would not be as much. So you can kind of see what happens there. So you would have a 2 cent in 2025, actually have a 10 cent in 2026, and then a penny out there in 2028. The caveat is, of course, as we get further away from the present time, these forecasts are not as accurate. We can do a pretty good job looking at a year or two, but we just don't know what's going to happen with the economy. And you may land a huge industrial prospect that has a major impact on the county that we just can't forecast at this point. The one thing to remember when I changed that tax rate, I did not change it in the budget period. So if I changed that in the budget period, you would actually probably see a little bit less of an increase here in these tax rates out in 2025 and 26. You may delay a tax increase to 2026 altogether. But I don't want to, without your permission, I don't want to change the draft budgets that you guys put together. So we hold off and let you dictate to us what you want that first year tax rate to be. And I'm gonna change it back to 0.56, just because that's what Lisa had provided to me earlier.
And the revenue that we're talking about here is, as far as the personal property tax increases, there's no decrease in that. That's at the full rate that we're looking at now.
Now, the budget is showing about $3.7 million in personal property. I think at the full rate, and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but the full assessment would be about 4.2 at the 2.25 rate.
That is correct.
So we would get a pretty good bump if that rate stays the same. The assessment, based on notes from Lisa, actually went up about 30%. So it's those assessed values on vehicles that has just gone through the roof in the past 18 months.
I down adjusted those, hoping those values will come down by the first of the year. And I used 10% as a conservative estimate.
Yeah, I think she's right, and that bump is going to be a one-time. It's going to be a one-time bump, and I would expect it to come back down as these supply chain issues kind of work their way through. So if you stay at 2.25, what we'll have to do is go and kind of dumb down the projections a little bit, because I do agree. I don't expect those assessments to stay as high as they are. You're going to encourage people, if prices of cars do stay that high, you're going to encourage people not to buy new cars. So they're going to put off those purchases, and older cars are, of course, they don't carry the values aren't quite as high.
Ms. Carroll, could you explain the 10% comment you just made? Are you
Sure.
saying in the out years or after this current year, you're expecting it to drop by 10? What, could you explain that?
Sure. Mr. Stone alluded to the fact that this is a one-time bump. It's really kind of 2 years. Some this year, a larger bump this year, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. In this current year, it's unanticipated revenue. The values went up way more than we anticipated. So there's money within the FY22 budget that is there simply because of inflation. We couldn't anticipate that. For FY23, what Mr. Stone was talking about, based on today's values, personal property taxes would be about 4.2 million.
Right.
I felt personally that was a little high and wanted to be more conservative, and I dropped that back to 3.7, which is about 10% difference.
3.7 gets you to what tax rate? $2?
It's still $225 on personal property.
Well, I think with the assessed values right now, if you wanted to generate $3.7 million, you probably would have to reduce that tax rate a little bit. Let me know if I'm misspeaking, Lisa, but then you may be in a position where you have to go a year from now and increase it right back to 2.25, or 2 years from now. You may have to fiddle with that one a little
We
bit.
can't change the assessed value.
No.
We just have to take that, and then, but we can change the tax,
The rate.
the rate.
Yeah, the rate on personal property, correct.
Yeah.
And I just picked that 10% hoping that those values would come down just a little bit, to be a little bit more conservative instead of showing those.
In the out years?
In the out year.
But in the current year, we've already missed our window of opportunity, I think, haven't we, to lower that personal property
Yes, we
rate?
have.
So we've missed that window.
Well, it was, you go ahead, sorry.
It was set last June.
Yeah, it was set last year.
Right.
But we haven't missed it for this upcoming.
This happened after the fact, inflation.
But for the personal property for the upcoming year, we have, if I could ask Commissioner Revenue, to lower that tax this year in the bills that are getting ready to go out, we've missed the deadline on the personal property, as I understand it. Can you help me with that?
That would be correct. I mean, the bills are in the process of being printed now, I think,
So that window
or
is,
soon to be.
yeah. So we missed that for this upcoming tax season.
Yes, there's a very small window of opportunity to get, when the values are in, to when the bills go out. It's just a very small matter of days. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So how did, you may not, he may be able to answer this, but how did other localities adjust that? Because the legislation was just passed to give local governments the opportunity to lower that. Do you know that by any chance?
No, I don't know anybody that's done anything with it. And a lot of localities just, I think you guys have twice year collections or make June collections, but most of them have December 5th collections, so they're just now setting that rate. And as we speak, they're working on their rates.
Okay.
Let's try it.
Out of curiosity, if that window is so short, are we still in the window to make an impact for next year's taxes?
Absolutely.
And when does that window close?
We have until you approve the budget.
Okay.
Right.
But we do have alternatives, like we could offer some discounts, rebates, or stimulus to offset that, could we not?
Yes, that can be changed, and there's several ways.
So we might have to get creative to back up and maybe give a break to the taxpayers, at least on the personal property piece of it. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're trying to adjust something in the current FY that we're in, we've got to get creative. If you're talking about the window that I see is how do we set the levies for the next year? That's what kind of where my mind is on this. Yeah, I mean, that's where I see the opportunity is for the next FY.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mr. Stubb.
You're welcome. And what I'll be doing in the next couple of days is getting a draft report together to get out to the board. And I'll allow you guys just to email me with questions. And then we'll try to get we'll probably stay in draft on the 24th because you're still going to be making decisions at that time. But just give you guys a chance to shoot me questions and how does this impact it and how does this change it. But what you find is these things they don't get set in stone, but depending on how much you move those tax rates, those are really the things that have a major impact. So, and your capital needs, how you expect to string that out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steiner.
Thanks, Clark.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next we go into the FY 22-23 budget work session. And this will be related to the budget. It would be the public hearings timeline. I think if we do a levy hearing, which I think would also the approval of the budget, would have to be set a separate time for, those, public hearings to occur, if not even separate dates, which might be up for discussion during this work session.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, are we discussing it? I think that we should set them at two separate days. The levy, and then after we set the levy, we have that hearing, then we approve the budget at the following year.
Is there any input from staff or any issues?
That option would work. Our lawyer, Steve Durbin, said one of the recommendations he said was to think about doing a 6:05 start for one and a 7:05 start for another, but you can certainly do it on different days.
Well, I think certainly if we do, Chair, speak ahead of the rest of the board, but, I think that consideration might be better if we did it on separate dates now, right? You know, if anybody wants to motion to grab it, because if we set the levy, then that may be some serious impact and, you know, implications, you know, to how the budget actually balances.
Sure.
And considerations made, you know, where there might be, you know, some area cut or something like that. If staff have any other input on that?
Yes, timing is of the essence here. One of the things that we did discuss with legal as well was that we are running out of calendar days. If we do that, we have the public hearing for the levy on, say, the regular June meeting, and then we have a public hearing at the closeout meeting for the approval of the actual 23 budget. We're gonna start July 1 without a budget. We have to wait 7 days before,
What is the date, the closeout date on the thing? I don't happen to have it in front of me.
it's the Monday, I think it's the last Monday in June.
27th?
Of June. So that is a consideration, maybe a special call meeting with the, if you prefer different days. We do need a 7-day window before after the public hearing for the budget, and then approving the budget after.
7 days.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with a special call meeting. It's a pretty big deal. And I think the citizens, you know, have more opportunity to see what's going on and participate. If we try to cram this all in one night, we're gonna have folks strode out through the hallways and go around that stuff again.
Let me fashion it in this manner. Is there more input by staff or?
Well, one thing that legal told us today was, probably be better to do the 30-day for the 1% change of the budget. Be better to do it first.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna have to reschedule your public hearing, but you might wait when it actually hits newspaper, and then it's 30 days. It has to go. And then your public hearing would come for your budget and your change of levy and all that after that. And that's currently scheduled for June 9th, I think. So we've got some time in it we gotta work out if you choose. That's why he was suggesting do what Mr. Shepley said. Do the 6:05, change your rules and procedures, suspend them, do one at 6:05 and one at 7 because of timing, not because of anything, just because of timing and working it out and having a completed budget before July 1st.
I hate cramming it all in one night.
I don't think we have to cram it in one night. I don't.
No, you just have to work your time.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I think you could do it 2 consecutive nights, makes more sense to me than trying to cram it all in one night.
Okay. So we could do, maybe, I'm not making a motion here, but what we would do if I'd entertain it, if someone can make that motion, maybe a special call meeting.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we have a special call meeting for the approval of the budget. And we have a separate meeting for the setting of the levy.
Okay.
A separate night. Within the time frames, I know we've got some strict timeframes, but we can meet those.
What would be the crunch day if we set that? Does anybody have access to the calendar? Try to make sure we, if not back to back, might be, but then, you don't give people enough time to maybe digest it or get their thoughts on it.
So trying to backward.
And I said 30 days, but I think it's actually 14.
So-
Steve
So,
said
what we-
Because the legislature did not pass the budget down the road. So it's 14 days that they got, that one has to be advertised.
All right.
The
So
30
what
the 30
day-
days
we're looking at
review
that.
is actually 14 days.
We can work backwards. All right, help me out here. Just work with me.
Okay.
If 1 July is the date, we gotta have it done by. All right. We've got a budget closeout that's gonna occur sometime that last week, right?
On the 27th, Monday.
Okay, so that's 27. For that to happen, we have to have an approved budget,
Yes.
all right? So how many days prior to budget closeout do we need to have the budget approved? Is there a requirement?
No.
Okay. So the budget has to be approved though, how many days prior to the start of the FY?
Can be the day before.
Okay, so we could, the 9th of June, we could set as the approval of the budget. That's our normal budget, our normal board meeting, right?
It's already said.
Okay, so then we still need to deal with the levy issue, right?
We need to do the levy first.
That's, I'm working backwards.
Okay, gotcha. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Working backwards, that's how I roll.
I apologize.
I'm in reverse all the way. So then the week prior, the first week of June, or the last couple days of May, but we've got Memorial Day at the end of that, at the first part of that week, we could have the levy discussion, right? So let's just say the 2nd of June, just for a goof, or the 1st. Does that work?
Second works.
Mr. Chair. Yes, sir. If I may, how long would it take to put the notice for the levy public meeting in the newspaper?
When we can answer that.
I can get it in there next week,
Next week.
but I'm gonna do it tomorrow to get it in.
So would that be a Monday or?
It would be Wednesday in the declaration. We only have to advertise in one paper, one time.
So it doesn't have to be the Independence Declaration?
It doesn't have to be the declaration,
But
it
that's what we
doesn't have to be the the Gazette.
So I'm trying to figure out the earliest it could be in the newspaper and the earliest we could have a meeting and then the latest that we could have a meeting. So would that be May 11th for the Independence Declaration?
Be May the 11th for the declaration.
And we have 14 days, so the earliest we could have a meeting would be the 25th of May?
Yes, sir.
And the latest we could have it be the 2nd of June. So is that the week that we have to work with there?
I think we were riding in the same week.
No, I'm a week earlier.
Well, I ain't got there yet. I'm still backing up.
I know what I know what I have on my calendar. I'm trying to work through.
Mr. Shepherd?
Could we use that May 24th budget meeting that's already on the schedule? We can't use that?
That's your dates.
That's been 14 days.
We've gotta have 14 days.
If you put it in the Gaelites Gazette
Uh-huh.
on the 9th or the 10th, because I understand the procedure here.
I'll be honest, I do not remember when, the Gazette has changed their days,
Wednesday and Friday.
Wednesday and Friday. Okay, so I don't know if I can get it in Friday or not. I honestly do not know.
Talking about this current Friday.
Yes, this current Friday,
Yeah, probably.
yeah.
I need to push it a little bit.
So we're back to the 11th, being our hard day, being levy, announcing the levy, because that has to go first, right?
The announcement
So the 25th is the earliest, but could we move our budget meeting from the 24th to the 25th?
This is a work session, this ain't, we won't be too formal tonight. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't remember, can we do it on the 25th? Because the 25th is the 14th day. Did Steve say anything about it being the day after?
I think it has to be, you can't count the day, you have to count the next day.
You count the next day that it comes out.
Can we move, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Can we move the budget meeting to the 26th?
That'll work.
That works with the calendar if it works with everybody else.
works for me.
Yeah. All right, so I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we make our public hearing notice no later than the 11th of May, and that would allow us to change our budget meeting from the 24th of May to the 26th of May to vote on the levy change.
Okay, we have a motion before the board. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Also aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, so we got that in there, so. We yield the floor, Mr. Shepherd.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the board, and Ms. Gayheart and Mr. Smith and I have been working diligently to get us to today, and I am going to ask Ms. Gayheart to walk you through what we have at this point.
Thank you. As Mr. Stone alluded to earlier, we do have a budget that we can balance together as a group based on a 56-cent levy. And that is at 96% increase, that would be a $10,150,270 revenue based on real estate taxes. All right, if we switch over here to our balance sheet, our expenditure sheet, I know I dropped this in late, it changes constantly. It changed as we were going through it today, reviewing it. They're always.
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yes, I can make it
Maybe
bigger.
you'll
Sorry,
make it bigger.
remind me, I get distracted. I'll calm down in a minute.
Thank you.
All right, and then we'll just scroll down through there, but, and this is in no particular order, but we left the expenditures in as requested. We made some adjustments, some up, some down, based on, our information. And then we went through and we noted the things that were, items of discussion, we'll call. And we came up with this particular balance sheet. So at a deficit of $1.3 million. So I'm asking you, what do you want to know where we might can find that $1.3 million? Or do you want to go through and hit the high points of where the big asks may be?
I think we're going to do both.
Okay, all right.
Start with the big ask if you're okay, and then we go back to where you recommend maybe doing some adjustments.
Very good.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Yeah, let's think about a 5-minute break. Sorry.
It makes you feel better, doesn't it?
I had a shower this morning.
Yeah.
Taco Bell boys, 600 calories every Thursday. That's for going to meet. There in the alley. Works for Randy Pim down there, he'd always get those taco salad.
Okay, I think we have everyone back now. Recording. Okay. We'll go ahead and call our meeting back to order. Ms. Gayhart.
Before we move on to expenditures review those, I wanted to take you to revenues and take a look at those. On the revenue tab, if you're following along with me on your, out of OneDrive, you click on your revenue tab and you'll see there's some bolded items here. We have the real estate tax current, again, this is based on 56 cents, and this is still a very movable, flexible number. Okay.
You have a page number because it doesn't have the, I don't see the tabs in here.
You don't see the tabs at the bottom?
Oh, I have to go all the way to the bottom there. Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
So,
Revenue tab.
All right.
The top real estate tax current is based on 56. This is not a hard and fast dead budget. This is very much a still living, breathing, and changing budget. You'll see that personal property tax current, again, I alluded to that earlier with Mr. Stone's comments that this very well could be a 4.2 million. I was a little conservative, hoping those tax rate, or that, not that tax rate, but the values would come down. And again, this is something that is flexible, and I've asked Commissioner Bolt to stay if we have any questions about how to change that personal property tax and the flexibility that we have there. So that's why I've asked him to stay for that particular reason, as well as some historical data.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I understand the process of the reassessment of real estate, but the reassessment of personal property tax, can you explain how that?
Sure, it's done every year. And Mr. Bolt, do you mind?
No, I don't mind. And what we're talking about here is vehicles, cars. And we take all the vehicles, and once we get a list of who owns what in Grayson County, and we send it to NADA, or it's called JD Power now, NADA, National Automotive Dealer Association, it's like Kelly Blue Book. And they put the values on there. And it's the value of your, the value, and we use a clean loan value of your vehicle as of January 1st each year.
Okay.
And the thing about it, the vehicle prices have gone up and up, and this year to from last year, I think it's like about 30%. But the values went up.
So that 3.7, you just backed off 10%
I did.
from what the actual number that we got
Because the
back.
actual number this year is 4.2.
4.2.
And what that's based, I'm sorry, can I say something? What that's based on, I mean, what we're talking here is in anticipation of what value is gonna be January 1, 2023. And who knows what that is? I mean, there's still a lot of talk out there, the values may be more.
So you just,
I mean, your pickup this year is worth more than it was last year. And it may be worth more than it next year than it is this
so
year.
this 3.7 is just an estimation of what January 2023 is gonna be that
Exactly.
affects this budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Finn, who's next?
So that's what I don't understand. If we're using 56 as the levy based on the real estate value that we got from the reassessment, why are we using 225, which is the current levy for, and that should be 4.2 as you said, it's a living, breathing budget, so if 2.25 gives us 4.2, at some point as part of the levy discussion, it's not just about real estate, it's also about personal property.
Yes.
And so it would seem to me, at least from my perspective, that having that number of the actual value would allow us to say, okay, unless that 10% is driving some recommended reductions in expenditures.
No, it was just a conservative estimate on vehicle values and not vehicle values, but personal property.
But that should be based on, I mean, if we've got the vehicle values from the J.D. Powers,
Sure.
then if 3.7 is your conservative number, then that should be a levy of $2 or $1.95 or whatever it is. Maybe it's just a process thing that I'm hung up on.
I think if I can, and listen, her 10% is assuming that maybe next year, 2023, January 1, the car values may start going back down. I mean, historically, your car depreciates every year. And that's historically been that way. Last year was the exception. This year was even more of an exception. It went up last year. It went up this year. Is it going to go up again next year, or is it going to start depreciating back down? That's, at least am I right in that?
We've got to make a decision within 30 days of what we think the levy should be across the board. And yeah, it's nice to project that. If you're saying that we need to project 3.7, then that's going to drive us to a certain levy rate. Okay, but the only thing we know is we know what our real estate assessments are. That's going to drive our levy based on expenditures. And we know what our personal property, we should use that same process.
Okay.
My way of thinking.
Do you have some? No, not yet.
I thought, is it this board's, I guess, opportunity to change that 2.25? So I guess that's the real numbers that we have are 4.2.
Yes.
And you backed it off 10% based off of an assumption, talking with people way smarter than me, that vehicle prices are gonna go down. But that is still at 2.25.
Yes, it is still at 2.25.
Oh, okay.
And I did have another conversation with Mr. Balt today on what, I think someone asked earlier, and I'm not sure who it was, but what are the other agents, what are the other jurisdictions around us doing? Some, and please correct me if I'm wrong to repeat you right in front of you, but some are doing nothing and leaving it because they feel like it's gonna yo-yo. You change it one year, you're just gonna have to change it back the next. Some are doing a bit of a back off to back down off of their real estate, or I'm sorry, personal property levy. Some are giving a refund, which very honestly scares me to death. We do not have the staff to do that. So rather do it in the front end if that's what you would like to do for fiscal year 23. And some are just carving out and only saying we're going to tax maybe only 80% of your vehicle value. And there's more than just vehicle values in this personal property number. There's merchants capital, machinery and tools, and that sort of thing. So just carving out the car, the personal vehicle values as well. So those are some of the options. I think that answers the question that was asked earlier.
You said that you need additional staff to do a refund. Can you elaborate on that?
That would be between the commissioner's office in trying to figure out how much to do that. And software is, I don't know that our software is capable of that as well. That may have to be done by hand.
Can I just talk about all this a little bit?
Please.
Lot of different philosophies to think about here. If we go back to our real estate, we had a reassessment. The values went up. Why did, and especially on houses, why did the values go up? It's what the market's doing. It's what the houses are selling for, and it went up. And then that's what we're getting into, reducing the levy or not, whatever. But we hired a professional firm, certified to do this, and they came in with what our values, new values, okay? On the personal property side of things, we hire a professional firm, NADA or JD Power, to put values on vehicles. And this is what they came back with what our vehicles values were. And I use my truck last year was like 14,800, 2014 Ford F-150. I think 14,800. This year it's like 17,300. 12,000 more miles on it, but it went up almost $3,000 in value. But we're hiring experts to tell us what the value, the market is. Now, some counties are looking at the vehicles this year and saying that's totally out of whack, and it's way too much. So they are looking at possibly doing some adjustments. One of that is to, and with legislation that was passed this year, you can pull out the category of vehicles now and make it a separate class and set just a rate for just vehicles. And they're deciding to maybe lower the rate to bring in the same amount of money that they had last year. That works well with counties that bill in December. They're looking at that now and have time to do that. When you're doing the mid-year like we are, that's just simply not possible. Some of those counties also decided to, instead of adjusting the levy, to only take a percentage of what the value. Instead of going 100% value, they would take 75%. And that way they was bringing in the same amount of money. Some counties decided to do nothing. One example, Roanoke City, Roanoke County. And I may have it flip-flopped on which one did what, but one decided to lower a levy, one decided not to. I think the city decided to leave their levy alone. Roanoke County decided to bring their levy down so much. Roanoke City decided to use their extra income and I think earmark it for some street improvements or schools or whatever. But that. Some counties are possibly doing, that's already sent bills out, or doing a rebate or a refund individually, and they are looking at taking, use my truck for example, of what taxes we anticipated getting from my vehicle as to what we're actually getting, and what it may be sort of like what it was last year compared to what it was this year, and doing a difference and doing a refund check. And I would be like Lisa, there's no way Edmunds could do that, our software. I'm sorry, I may say.
I think he has a question. No. So what would be your solution? And I'm gonna pause that for a second. The reassessment of the real estate value, we have that for 6 years. So the decision we make on the levy is impactful for a much longer period of time. And first time in history, vehicles are up, whatever the percentage is. If we adjust that 2.25, let's just call it 2.2, and we drop it 10% and we go down to a 2. Plus next year, you're anticipating the value of the vehicles to go down 10%. We could potentially make a 20% swing by messing with the 2.25. Am I understanding that?
That's, could be potentially correct.
Correct.
And I think that's one thing why some places decide not to, I mean, and if, you know, you decide to go down with the personal property levy, we're talking about next year, I mean, that next fiscal year, next year that we're doing based on values of January 1, 2023 that we have no idea.
7 months.
Yes.
And to make a big decision that we won't even know the answer 7 months from now.
Right.
So I get to my original question, do you have a suggestion from
Probably
the
not.
commissioner's office.
Probably not, because there's too many variables out there just unknowns.
I made one more question. You showed us the dollars impacted per home on the case study that we looked at based off of a 59-cent levy and a 52-cent levy. We haven't seen the actual dollar impact per person because there's no way to, some people drive a vehicle that's worth $1,000 and some people drive them that are worth $100,000. Will the person that drives the $10,000 vehicle be impacted any differently than the person that drives the $100,000 vehicle?
A lot of the days increase more on the newer vehicles. The older ones didn't increase as much, and even some of those may have decreased. But some of these $50,000 pickups are worth now more than $50,000.
Can you give like just an estimate of a $50,000 vehicle, what the tax was last year and what it would be?
Can you give me a moment or two while y'all discuss something else briefly? I'll get you pretty
If
close.
I'm going down a rabbit hole, I don't intend to, but
That's a good question. I like it.
So if I now understand your thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but that reduction is based on what you hope the value will be in January before the tax bills go out.
or what you would think it would.
It's
Yeah.
Not what I think, what I hope.
You hope it goes down.
I hope it goes down, yes. That's a conservative hope.
There's a thought process too, in that thinking that the supply chain of the new vehicles is somewhere gonna be alleviated. That'll alleviate the price of used vehicles that everybody's fighting for. That'll start to take those down when the supply issues on new vehicles is alleviated. That's all hope and all speculation.
What we've listened to tonight is a pure guess with everything. I bet when we had the budget meeting in 2019 to discuss fiscal year 2020, I bet the forecasts were wrong on that. I bet the forecasts are gonna be wrong moving forward. And so that personal property tax, to me, is essentially, at least the way I'm kind of looking at it, is a luxury tax. I'm gonna drive a $100,000 vehicle, your taxes are gonna go up more on than someone who drives a $10,000 car. But the more we mess with that 2.25% number, it makes a much bigger impact on that projection in January than I mean, if we change that 2.2% much, let's say, which I doubt I'm right on this, let's say Lisa's wrong, and everything squares up and personal property goes down 20%, and we've changed it back down to 10% to a knee-jerk reaction to fix this. One of the first time in history that boats have appreciated, then we're gonna have a harder discussion of raising it back up to a 2.4 to get to the same number next year. I guess that's my line of thought.
I've got a question. In the personal property is 3.7 million that we're looking at there. Does that include the $25 car sticker fee?
No, it does not. That's
Where is that at?
falling down to the vehicle license fee,
Okay,
and that's $394,006.
all right.
And again, in the 22, based on what will be billed out, and of course, there's a 96% collection rate there. It's $410,423.
All right, so along the lines of what Mr. Ivy said, maybe that would be, since we're specifically talking about the car tax, right there might be something we could work on. That separate item, 394,000. That, and if I understand, if you guys correct me, all of you been here longer than me, but that was originally a sticker to buy school buses, and it's just been carried down in tradition for years and years. Is that the origin of that $25 fee, or would that predate you as well?
It predates me.
Predates all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's
I don't
been,
know. I've heard this.
Larry.
I've heard that. Well, okay, like.
It doesn't predate me.
Good.
It's, however, when it first started, predated me. But the stories I've always heard when they first put it on, I think it started out $5 as a decal, and they was used to buy school buses. That was on there, and now it's increased from 5 to 25. And then there was some talk so many years ago, it was, at one time, it was maybe designated, designated to school buses, but then that bypassed and it just went to general fund. And then finally, they eliminated the decal, but did not eliminate the license fee. And that's a common occurrence with a lot of counties, eliminate the decal, but not the fee. So, did that answer?
Yeah, just a thought. I know that's pretty good, Hunter, but if we entertain the idea of maybe waiving that fee as a form of relief this year, revisit it next year, whatnot, that might be
It's a done deal this year too.
So we would.
In terms, that's on the personal property bill. That's when it's attached.
But it would be an opportunity for FY '23.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry.
It gets really confusing when you're right at the end of one fiscal year and talking about another one, so.
So back to the personal property thing, I understand where you're going, and that's not my line of thinking. I mean, I'm in line pretty much with what you're saying, the concern about it possibly being a 20% swing. I mean, that's what happened 6 years ago, I think, when we thought we were gonna have the last reassessment, we thought it was gonna go up 3 or 4%, and it actually went down 1%, and so it was a huge problem. But if you adjusted the personal property to $2 just for a goof, what's the number? Because that's close to a 10% change in the fee or tax, but I don't know what it equates to as far as a real dollar amount compared to what the 4.2 was. And I'm with you. I mean, a lot of this has to do with how do we want to generate the revenue in order to make the investments that we know we need to make in the different areas, right? But we need to be smart about the revenue generation. And so, given the times we're living in. And so if we're, the levy is floating right now on the real estate side, all these things are floating in my mind.
Mr. Chair, if I may, yes, sir. Summing up, that's something that happens every year. So when you start playing with it, you have to play with it every year because those are such unpredictable swings that Supervisor Anderson brings up a good point. We're in excess of $400,000 this year in 2022 vehicle licensing fee. That's about the same number of going from a 4.2 from the NADA value back to the 10% change. That's just a projection. We actually have real numbers sitting in front of us, and they're the same number. If we decide to, as a board, to waive the vehicle license fee because it's being made up, I think I'm getting this squared around in my head. Those are actual real numbers that we can look at. instead of going off a projection that, not being insulting to anybody, but nobody can make that projection a year from now, or 7, 8 months from now. But those are real numbers that we can see, and they're actually about the same amount.
Would be a decrease of about 400,000. Do you agree?
I don't have that number. It's right there. I mean,
He does this for a living. I don't do this part.
So the 225 and $2 results in a 400,000,
I would feel a lot more
which
comfortable with
matches-
Mr. Bolt.
which you would achieve the same thing by.
That's right.
I get it.
I would like for Mr. Bolt to confirm that.
So,
Well,
yes,
but I mean, we're just playing on paper right now. I mean,
Yes, we are.
I think conceptually, I get the thing, and that's a real number you can play with. I get that.
yeah, and so, yes, what I'm saying is, the $410,423, that's the real number impact this year in your vehicles. Licensing fee,
You can't just take that.
and the $500,000 projected decrease next year if everything goes well. For all intents and purposes, it's essentially the same ballpark number. And where we've impacted the taxpayer dollars, not by any decision made by this board, but by the value of equipment and vehicles going up. If we want to lessen that burden, instead of playing with that 2.25 every year that we're gonna have this discussion, we could do a one-time.
Well, to be frank, we play with the levy every year. It's the real estate values don't change, but the levy can change every
Well,
year.
and
All these numbers.
And I guess that's my point, is the value of this is gonna change every year too. The value of the real estate will not change for the next 6 years.
The value won't, but the levy could.
That's right.
Yeah, fair enough. Start speaking before I have a call. I have a tendency to do that.
I think the
No, they can
$25 would be,
They can change.
at least.
They get an assessment every 6 years.
It would help,
The levy
it would help
can
our
change it
loan
with
folks when they have 3 or 4 cars and working. And I know, even if you look at it as a luxury tax,
They just have their.
most of these
They
folks
just, that's just the way
that
they've
have
been
big
doing it.
trucks,
There's nothing preventing them. to
it's
do it
also a
every two
working
years.
truck,
Yeah.
and maybe they have fun use and get some kind of break on that.
They can do whatever they
the-
want. But if they gotta-
Just the everyday working folks going back and forth, wearing out their vehicles and that kind of
See, the
thing.
thing is,
I think this
what
would
they're doing,
somewhat help
the
and
vehicle tax.
maybe be a good gesture, but I don't, still, it's a long ways from probably where most folks would like us to be.
Better.
But I think it's a good point to start at, and I think the numbers kind of line up.
I mean, they're paying $400 more this year.
When we went from, when the treasurer recommended that we get rid of the
Dealership
decal
that has 40 vehicles. It's gonna be-
and go to a fee, my recollection of it was tied to the ability to enforce real estate, payment of real estate. We had a huge delinquency, what's that? Personal property. We had a huge delinquency list on that. And by going to the fee, I think it allowed him to put a lien on the treasurer, to put a lien on the vehicle or something, which forced people not to be able to say, yeah,
DMV stop.
DMV stop.
They won't take it off.
In order to then, they couldn't register it, and then they had to come pay the tax. Correct. So, so what of the going from away from the decal but keeping the fee, I think actually helped us drive up the payment rate of the other taxes, right? So, if we potentially do away with that fee, is there a second or third order effect or suspended, for a year? If you do away with that fee, does it have some unintended consequences on other taxes? What?
Well, the ability and police.
That's what, well, the DMV stops will go away, and then would that
They were.
have any sort of adverse effect on any of your sudden collection?
The license fee won't have anything to do with D&B stops.
Oh, that's personal property. Yeah, that's right, that's correct.
Two different.
Your D&B stops are put on when unpaid taxes on a vehicle goes past the due date so long. And the second notice is getting mailed out that.
So there's no linkage.
There's no linkage.
Okay.
They did away with the decal. People fussed about having to put decals on
Yeah.
windows and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And la-da-da. So we did away with that, but they basically didn't want to lose that revenue. But also doing this increased the revenue because a lot of people wasn't buying decals for all their vehicles. And actually, we brought in more money when we went to vehicle license fees.
Okay.
But in terms of doing away with and suspending whatever you want to,
There's no
it's not going to
linkage
affect.
between.
You're still going to get the taxes on the
Yeah.
thing, and once it's not paid, the DMV stops us to do.
Okay.
And the enforcement, I think, might have been where when folks didn't have a sticker, they might got a ticket, which wasn't really strictly enforced. I don't know if that was maybe where that enforcement thing forward.
No, I just remember it was part of the discussion, but I may be mixing stories together.
But I know we call that a fee. I don't, it's a tax. If we call it a fee, I don't know why we call it a tax. I guess it softens a blow if you call it a fee, but it's a tax. And I think it's an opportunity there we can do something. Okay.
Do you wanna take that out? You wanna just play with the numbers and take that
I
out?
think play with it, see what happens.
Let's take it out.
But if you take that out, that changes your other number back to 4.2, right?
Still a projection.
Still a
It is a
projection.
projection,
But the real impact has already happened this year.
Yeah, I know, we're talking next year. I got it.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is we had increased revenue in the personal property, in the vehicle tax, 400 and, it's not, $420,000. We've already got to enjoy that this year. And whether her prediction is correct or not, if that's taken away, it would take that back to even, if I'm understanding that.
And if we're working through this budget, I mean, and we know we can't change it till the next one, I mean, what consideration would that matter? Or, you know,
One thing
if
I
we take
did
it out, I mean,
of the vehicle fee.
the current budget, that we're working out this current budget.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
But if we take this, we know, we're counting on that revenue in this budget. It's already a done deal, right? So in working this current budget,
Yes.
what does it benefit to take it out? I mean, it's already a player in the consideration. You see what I'm saying?
I think so, and that's, you lead right to my next point. You know, this was unanticipated for fiscal year 22. It was a surprise. We had no idea we were gonna get this much extra money, basically, in this 22 budget. So what are we gonna do with that extra money? We can actually carry it over. And that is what I've done here. I took the difference between the 4.2 that was actually billed out and our 2.2 realization, did the 96% collection rate on there, and the here is 1.7 that we can actually carry over to help balance FY23's budget. So that is realizing it this year. It's there if we need it to close out the fiscal year, but if we don't use it, we do not have to let it just go to fund balance. We can actually use that toward expenses for next year, whether it be, you can never count on it, just, this is your bonus. You can't count on your bonuses or your overtime. So this would be a carryover of a one-time expense or a one-time revenue that you could use for capital or special projects.
Yes, sir. That 1.7 1.768, that's already been realized
That is being realized
currently.
as we speak.
And is that 1.768 circled back into the budget to balance?
Not the current budget, no, sir.
Not the
Not
fiscal year
22.
2023?
This is what you're looking at, is 23. So yes, I did.
So that
circle back
1.7
in.
is rolled back into the 23 budget?
Yes, I
Okay.
rolled it into the 23 budget.
Okay.
To offset all the levies if necessary, because it was unanticipated. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. Okay.
So what are some other options to do with that? You said we need capital improvements or what else? What was it?
If you didn't want to roll it over, carry it over into the budget, or if you wanted to earmark it specifically for special projects, it could be for, using that to update, we'll talk about the park in a little while. We're gonna talk about EMS in just a little while. You can earmark that to roll over into one of those particular focus areas, or you can use it to offset all the capital expenses, all the vehicles, the trash trucks that are needed, the fleet vehicles that are needed, the police cars that are needed. Those are some examples.
That number is already worked into this budget.
It is, yes, it is.
So that, you've got a balanced budget at 56-cent levy, and that 1.768 has been spent in the balanced budget. I guess that's.
Well, let's go on.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
Let's go on.
That's a true statement, because if you take it out, it's gonna raise your levy
Yes.
9 cents to offset it.
Yes, it is, but let's go on, because we do have, I'm not presenting you a balanced budget tonight.
Oh.
Okay? I am presenting you a budget with excessive or,
Sure.
yes, a shortfall. Thank you so much. All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Shea.
So what we've done is gone through and said, okay, in order to get to a balanced budget, what items within the budget could we potentially drop? And we've given them ratings of low, medium, and high priority as far as the impact that they would have of being removed. That's what she's going through with you right now, is saying, these are things that, as she goes forward, these are things that we could potentially cut. Some of them will have a high impact on our operations, some will have a low, so that you can give us your opinion about what you think we should cut.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and just to follow his lead, we have a deficit of 1.7 million, but we have some items to discuss. So that is where, scroll up just a second. Our discussion items are 2.3 million. So you can see where we have a lot of play in what we decide is priorities and what needs to be funded for this upcoming fiscal year. Okay, this items to discuss is a tab on your budget if you're following along. All right, again, they're low to high impact, low, medium, and high. There's your 2.3, if you can just barely see that at the bottom. They add up to 2.3 million. Our deficit is only 1.7 at this particular moment. So you can see that we've got a little bit more play, and I'm repeating myself, but sorry about that. All right.
So when you looked at this and you're taking items out of the budget that gives us play, for example, the rec park, is the $14,000 vehicle the only thing you took out of the rec park budget to play around with?
No, there was
Oh,
another.
that one employee?
Yes, there's another one at the bottom. That was a high impact.
Number 18?
Yes, line number 18. So there's two there. We can resort them if you want to look at them by department. But I just sorted them by impact. impact to the overall operation.
Yeah,
How
I
we
mean,
determined, I'm sorry.
No, I just, I went through the EMS presentation again, and they need, this idea of capital investment in a fire truck and an ambulance. I get that. I do think that we need to figure out how to cover their operational expenses, like we talked about, I think, last year, try to figure that out. I'm just not convinced yet that we need to move towards the first responder paid positions by the county. I'm not convinced that we need the quick response vehicles. I realize that we've got departments that are hurting people, and that needs to be addressed. But that presentation, it's hard to argue that it's a volunteer organization if the county's putting that kind of money into it, even though it is a very critical no-fail mission. And so the idea behind capitalizing the fire trucks, the ambulances, so that we're keeping them going with current stuff every year. The idea behind operationalizing that they have the funds, so they don't have to go out and fundraise. They have the funds to operate. Makes sense to me.
Every other year.
But there's a lot of passion behind the volunteer side of it. And I'm just not quite ready to make that jump for the paid positions yet. Fully acknowledging that there's some departments that are doing it independence freeze. Got free to some degree. And so that to me right there is a little bit of money that I'm just not right there on that.
We did include one, the request was for 3 of those positions with the vehicles.
They don't count calls.
We did feel like one was negotiable with the administration, but that, again, that one gives you an example of you can multiply by 3 if it's 2.
Yeah, it's just, another vehicle is another vehicle, and we're talking about
Maybe an independent.
replacing all these other vehicles. And so, I understand the QRF concept, I understand the challenges we're facing with the volunteer side. I'm just not there yet with the paid positions.
So much more to be had.
And the effect that might have on sustaining it, because it's a tough row to hoe to keep you heard Mr. Corbin Stone talk about, the demographic challenge that we're up against. So we're in a tough spot going forward. At some point, I think reality is going to set in. I just don't want the reality to be quite yet, I guess, when it comes to the full-time position.
His reference to the aging population and the decreasing population just means that we have fewer volunteers to pull from. We have fewer people to pull volunteers.
Yeah, but 3 years ago, there was a proposal to put more effort into recruiting, and some departments have been pretty successful with it. I just don't know that we as a county have embraced that effort as fully as we could to assist. That is a lot cheaper than the current proposal. I'm not saying that we're not eventually going to get there.
Sure. Well, Mr. Chair, I'm on the exact opposite end as Mr. Fant, because I think it is a great necessity, and it's also one of our highest priorities when we're looking at this. There's been a lot of time and thought put into developing this, and emergency services to our citizens should be one of the highest, if not the highest priority. And I think we're right on track with what we have here on that. As far as the EMS, if we move down, I see here that the school system, their RLE, what was we cut their request from, was it 1.7 they were requesting?
I have not cut anything. These are talking points. These are discussion points.
Well,
What their
that's what we're
request is.
discussing.
Yes.
It's 600,000 here
Yes.
from 1.7, I guess, is that?
Mr. Smith may be able to address
Sir,
that.
what first request was 1.1 in the budget that they brought to us?
Then it went to
And
1.6.
somehow or another it got pushed to 1.7.
1.72.
And does that $600,000 represent that difference? So there's still 1.1 above LRE in the budget.
Let's go to that. It's still here. See, this is what they requested, this is the admin recommended. This is this is items to discuss. So this is still completely negotiable, but it is in the budget.
Was the original request 1.1?
Yes, the original
Okay.
request was
Oh.
1.1. Yes, that's where the 600,000 came from.
So the 1.1 you're referencing, was that at the joint meeting we had, or did
Yes.
that come later?
It was at the joint meeting, the very first meeting.
And their request that night was 1.1.
Yes,
And if I remember correctly, that night we were encouraging them, tell us what it is you need.
yes, and
So-
they did.
And
This
to
is-
cut out teacher salaries.
Yes.
To put it all
Exactly,
out
you'll
of
see
the
that.
A different
conversation.
item.
See, there's no request in above LRE for RLE for instruction. So they did what was asked.
Okay.
They did follow up with that.
Okay.
So I don't want you to think we've cut anything. We've presented you with some ideas as to, priorities and how to juggle those priorities. So we're, and again, we did choose from low to high impact. That was our choice. We made that determination, but they're all for discussion.
Number 12, transfer tech ed, 310,000.
Yes.
Is that Baywood project?
That is for the technical education altogether, so it was both the library, fixing the library and freeze, and the Baywood project as well. That can all be covered by ARPA funds, so that can actually just come out of the expenditure budget. If it's the pleasure of the board.
So are we gonna be discussing the rec park as a whole, or is this your presentation? Because that was a pretty hefty budget that we got
Sure,
from the rec park.
We can drill down to the
Is that what we were going towards?
Well, that seems to be one of the ones that was a little inflated from prior years, so.
And that's how we selected these items to discuss. We actually took what
Was
was
everybody
presented.
discuss that, Rick? Okay.
That's what we took, how we determined this list of items to discuss. We took last year's budget and this year's budget and said, what's different? What's different about each of these budgets? So I know that some of you had asked, well, have you talked to the department heads about, going back and just doing a 10% cut across the board? And I think I said that's not really fair this time, because it was just a few particular budgets that increased where the other stayed fairly level. So that's where we went back through and pulled these out. I'm sorry, Mr.
Oh,
Shipman.
that's right. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Just for a little bit of background, particularly for the new folks, what happened in Parks and Recreation is that there was an opinion, and those of you that have been here, please correct me if I'm wrong about this, but that there was too much emphasis just purely on the rec park and on independence, and not on what could be done throughout the county. Like we wanted to, there was a interest in expanding the whole Parks and Recreation component to be a true countywide effort. And so what we did was we brought in a person who had extensive background working with, as a second in charge at Blacksburg, the city of Blacksburg, in order to do that, in order to move forward with what the board had indicated that they wanted us to do. Obviously, as you look at everything, you've got to decide what the priorities are. What we were trying to do is respond to what we heard from the citizens and from the board, which was make this Parks and Recreation program into a truly countywide effort with many more offerings and much broader array of possible activity. So it wasn't just an internal decision to expand it. It was sort of a community request and board request and our interest in trying to get that done.
Well, I'm not sure who in the community requested it to be all over the county, but it looks like, when I look at his budget, we're looking at salary. I don't see a reflection of it going all over the county as, I guess, is your vision or model. But we're talking office supplies, building grounds, chemicals, another employee, that might aid in other parts of the county. And then there's a capital improvement request for around 450,000, I think it is. These are things I'm sure that need to be addressed, but maybe not in one big bite, maybe over a few years. I know they didn't get run down over a few years, and it's going to be hard to fix it all back in a few years. But we especially, I don't think, can do that in 1 year. And what I'm hearing from the community is concern over the real estate assessments and high taxes and the potential for their property values to decrease significantly in the next 2 years. And see, we're still stuck at that same assessment. What's that for 6 years? So we're facing we're facing some challenging times. And I don't like the pool consumables, program supplies, those kinds of things. And I get it, and I understand. I asked a question at the last meeting about we almost doubled the salary of that position, and it seems like we might have needed an EMT, and we hired a brain surgeon because he's very sharp, very very good at what he does and knows his thing. But we may be a little over our skis on this one. And I think there's where we need to make some major adjustments, at least in this upcoming year.
Mr. Chairman? Yes. One of the new tools that we have is the Zen City tool that I told you a little bit about, that gives us a feel for what in public dialogue, what is the community saying about different things that the county's doing. And we just got our first report, and the greatest interest is in EMS in the county, definitely so. But the greatest positive feedback that we've received is what we're doing in Parks and Recreation. So the public is sensing that and talking about that, and we have evidence to show that that's happening. It's not a massive amount of people, but at least we're making some impact. I certainly understand exactly what you're saying about maybe do it incrementally, and what we're doing is showing you what would need to be done in order to get us to that next stage. And maybe it may need to be done incrementally. We can work with whatever the board thinks makes sense in these various areas. We'll work with it and make it work. Whether it's moving quickly to implement a countywide comprehensive recreation program, or whether it's a 2 or 3 year process, we'll work with it.
Well, if you're going to refer to Zen City, I'm sure people, and myself included, are happy with some of the things going on at the rec park and more kids participating. But I don't think that would be fair to say that Zen City supports I don't think that would support this expenditure that we're looking at here. I don't think that's what the folks are saying. I think they're really saying that they're happy with it. And he's doing that now in the current budget. So, I think we need to take small bites on that. And
I guess that we get wrapped around on some of the individual things, and we forget about what it is that we're trying to do, which is to provide services. That's kind of what we're in the game for. And so I think the real discussion is not so much about the salary that one individual makes or doesn't make, but what's the service that we want to provide, because ultimately we're here to do what the citizens want to do or what they need to do, and also to address the strategic problem that we've heard about, which is our population problem. Fully acknowledge that if we're continuing to lose people, we're going to continue to have a revenue generation problem under the current construct. Got it. But to reverse that, you've got to make investments in certain things. And we can invest in emergency services, which we are. We're invest in the school, which we do. We invest in the sheriff's department, which we do. But there's other things to make life worth living in Grayson County worth investing in. And some things have been, as you said, I think last meeting, ignored or not paid attention to over the last several years. That I think is a lot what's caught up in this budget, is there's a bit of catching up to do on the recreation side. And a lot of it is at the rec park. But my criticism of the rec park, the previous governance was, yeah, they weren't paying attention to the rec park, but we weren't addressing also the needs of people in the other parts of the county as well. So what excites me about this, regardless of the total amount, whatever we end up at, is that there is a plan to expand recreation opportunities to everyone in the county. That's what I think is worth supporting. I'm not wedded to whatever the total value is there. I think we do have some flex in that. But I think the discussion is about what services do we want to provide or try to provide that are benefit to all the citizens, one way or the other. Your comment, emergency services, absolutely, no fail mission, supported it all the time. Doesn't mean it's not right for criticism and criticism per se, but just the scrutinizing, I think, is the word I'm looking for. On, is that the direction that we need to go this year? Same sort of approach. But I think ultimately we've got, at least the way I look at this budget from year to year, it's how does it support, not next year, but what are we doing 3 to 5 years down the road to be able to make sure that we're doing all we can to get people to stay here or even to move here. And if we can do that, I think we're doing a lot of what government can do. And so that's kind of what shapes my view on some of these things. At the same time, I want to preserve our community's structure that we can as long as we can. And this idea behind maintaining as much of the community involvement in different activities, I think, is really good for everybody. So anyway, that's kind of my philosophy looking at this. So I do think that there's some things in the rec budget that can be probably delayed a little bit, but overall, I think it's playing a lot of catch-up ball that can then move to sustainment.
I'd like to say, as shocking as the number may be, doubling the budget, to me, it's more shocking that a county that holds the #1 visited state park in the state of Virginia is only putting that amount of money towards recreation. Doesn't matter where you travel. You say you're from Grayson County, you can say Independence, nobody's ever heard of it. You say Grayson County, they say, I've heard of Grayson Islands. And this county is the most beautiful county in the state of Virginia. People from all over the world come here to recreate. And in my estimation, the decision to make a county-wide Parks and Recreation Department was absolutely necessary. I get that that's when Josh presented his presentation to us, 90% of it was fixing the stuff that this county let fall down over the years. And I know in the past, you were very, very active up at that rec park, and the parents had to put money into it because the county would not commit the funds necessary. And so when we talk about salaries or money being spent, we're doing twice the budget. There are twice the amount of teams playing baseball and softball and t-ball and coach pitch this year. That is really, really good for our county. And the fact that we're putting focus on other parts of recreation in this county should have been a priority for this county a long, long time ago. Asking our fertilizer dealers to come put fertilizer out on the ball field because the county wouldn't pay for it, and borrowing equipment to make baseball fields up there in the most beautiful county in the state of Virginia. To me, that is the smallest ask that has been asked for this entire budget season. And sure, you can cut it back, we can not fund it. I, for one, am glad that we are making a commitment to recreation in this county. And I think our new recreation department director is on fire, and he's doing a great job. As a parent who has 2 young kids in the system right now, I am pleased that the county is putting the effort toward it. And that's my take.
Well, I'm not suggesting we don't fund the rec park by any chance, but I think you kind of made part of my point too. The park that you reference is run by the state. That brings folks in here, that's not the local rec park that's bringing hundreds of thousands of people in here, as I'm told, at Grayson Highlands. So I know there's an effort to capitalize on some of that traffic. But this didn't happen overnight. I don't think we can fix it overnight. And I've always and will be a supporter of the rec department. But really, I think this is a big bite in the grand scheme of things. And you know, if we're gonna scrutinize the school system, we're gonna scrutinize the EMS. I just think we need to do justice and scrutinize this pretty hefty chunk here. Again, I realize where I stand.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm all about scrutinizing the budget, but if I could sum it up, I would say shame on the county for not supporting this for much, much longer than it has. And the one position that is in this budget to hire an assistant is to run the rec park and let our new director explore other opportunities of what we can do in the western end of the county. And to me, the rec park we already have, and that a lot of that money that's in that budget is just to get the rec park back up to speed where it ought to be. Allegheny County, North Carolina, parents from all over love to come to this park because it's one of the best around. And we've already made the commitment to have a facility like that here in the county. And if we don't fund it, we let it keep running down like we've done years past. We don't like spending money on Baywood School that's falling apart. We're certainly not going to like spending that kind of money on a rec park that should have been taken care of for years. And if we want to bring global recreation ideas to Grayson County, the last thing we want to do is keep our Parks and Rec director right here in Grayson County to give Grayson County ideas when he could be going to conferences and seeing what other counties are doing to be creative with their recreation in counties that would be similar to us. So I'm in full support of supporting the recreation. I would love to see it grow. I wish it was an unlimited budget. It's not. I wish it was an unlimited budget for the EMS request. It's not. And we do have to make hard decisions, but you know, the EMS is absolutely important for everybody in this county, but it is not used by everyone in this county. Parks and Rec is used by just a few people in the county, but it could be used by everyone in the county. And I'd much rather people want to use the rec park than have to use the EMS. Even though I fully support it, we've got to take care of both of them. But it's got a little brighter spin.
They're out there having fun, breaking legs. Who knows?
Money on making people happy in the county instead of having to go down on the beam and dig them out where they fall.
Well,
Yes,
I get that, but I just spending money to make a few people happy when I get that. I support the rec park to an extent, but this idea that it's on the taxpayers to make people happy, I don't know where this ideology is not my ideology, I hate to say, but and I believe, we do have to provide services, but I think we prioritize those services that are the most needed. And I think right now we're in a really critical time with our economy, and I think we need to make the taxpayer happy by trying to help them every way we can.
be frugal. I'm not saying we can't do this stuff in small steps, but one failed chunk, I still struggle.
2 year college education. Go out and make more money in college. 16 weeks.
We're gonna have a lot of ideology and philosophy sessions here, but we need to get down and get some brass tacks. So let's.
Could we talk the school piece? Can you go back to their portion? You okay with talking? So a couple weeks ago, as it's already been brought up, you know, the joint meeting was 1.1. I think the budget above RLE request from the school was 1.75, something like that. I think it said 1.72, but I think it's 1.75. So a couple weeks ago, I guess 3 weeks ago, Brantley and Randy Chenault, Chris Anders and I got together and just kind of looked at it, tried to have a discussion about a concept. It's just a concept proposal. But, you know, the big driver here, I think, and there's two things that we need to, you know, that are fact. Number one, the school system's getting ARPA money or ESCR money, whatever you want to call it, about 7.2. County's getting, I think, 3 point something. So that's a fact that needs to be thought about as we think about above RLE funding. And the other fact that some of the discussions that we've had prior to the joint meeting bared fruit in the discussion with the teacher thing. So we got that emotional issue off the table and got it into their base budget. And I think that's good for everybody around. So the items that we can talk about are things that we can finance, right? So the discussion started then, since their ask was for 1.75, that's where we started the discussion, all right? And so there's a couple of ones on there, the operations and maintenance, 45K, no problem. 127,799 for food, definitely no problem. Although there may be offsetting federal funding line associated with that, I don't know. But anyway, no problem. But then on the transportation piece, I think that was about 3 buses and a maintenance vehicle, if I remember right, Brent. And I know that in their ESCR money, they've got some buses, you know, scheduled to be purchased in that. So. What the four of us kind of agreed to is a bus and a maintenance vehicle as part of that. So that's about a 200K purchase for the bus and the maintenance vehicle. So the total amount that came out for the actual, now keep in mind, we're still at 1.75 of the ask, all right? But it came out to about 375,000, I think. Let me look here. 373,000 is what that comes out to, all right, of what the four of us talked about. One of the other real challenges that we've faced with the school system is capital improvement. How do we address long-term capital improvement issues with the school? We've tried a variety of different techniques. We've asked them to self-fund it. We've asked them to use their carryover or rollover money. None of it's frankly worked to be able to provide the facilities and fix the problems. So part of that discussion then was, well, maybe then out of this 1.8, we create a CIP for the school system, all right? And keep in mind, they've got the ARPA money, that one-time grant money that they've got to do a lot of capital improvement stuff. So the focus in our discussion was spend that money on things you need to get fixed. So the other thing that came up was, you know, the athletic field. And I think there was, my general sense is that school system's going to build the field. And so if that's the case, I'm not a fan of the concept, but I am a fan of the opportunity that might provide us as the county, all right? So their estimate, I think, was about a 1.2 million for the field. And so if we went in partners with them, that'd be about 600K, all right? But there's a caveat associated with that 600K, and that is that would not be part of the RLE. Above RLE, it would be part of the rec department budget for the county, with the caveat being that it's for use at the athletic facilities with the school, with the goal being to develop opportunities across the school system with the county rec department to be able to see where we might be able to co-use facilities and do more things with what, I mean, they basically operate wellness facilities all around the county, right? And so is there a way that we can partner with them through the investment of the money into the rec facilities down at the high school to be able to open up more opportunities for things that might be up at the rec park, that might be up at Highland School, that might be over in Freeze, to give the rec director, park and recs director, opportunities to do more things than he already is. And I think there's a pretty good partnership there already. There just might be opportunities to get access to more things if we work this partnership. So you've got the 373, you've got the 600,000, that leaves you roughly 784,000 of that 1.75 ask, right? And that 784,000 would be put into the CIP, the school CIP. But that fund would be fenced until 2025 when the ARPA money runs out, okay? So they're investing the money that they got from the federal government for the next 3 years to fix a lot of their things. And I think, well, they did. They brought a list of, I don't know, there's like 20 or 30 things that they know in priority that they know they need to fix. And a lot of them were being addressed through the ARPA money. But from what we saw, that kind of was the list for the CIP. And so in 2025, if we invest a certain amount of money, and I'm not saying it's got to be this amount of money every year, but if we invest a certain amount of money every year to the school CIP, come 2025, if you assume you invest that same amount of money, you're sitting on 2.1 million in their capital improvement fund that they then can access to do things after the ARPA money runs out. Does that make sense? So we thought it was a pretty good discussion about how to approach this issue. I think through Brantley's leadership, there's been a lot of goodwill kind of reestablished with that group based on things that I've screwed up in the past years. But this is an idea or a proposal that I think would move the ball down the road and help maybe bridge some of the gaps between this board and that board, while at the same time addressing some of their needs and also opening up opportunities for the rec, further exploitation of development with the rec and parks.
Mr. Chair, to me, the goal that I was at was not being on this board. It was embarrassing to watch the Board of Supervisors and the school board argue every year. We shouldn't be arguing in a community this small with so much good going on. And so we started having these meetings with that in mind. What can we do to get along? And frankly, I'll say it publicly, I don't care what it costs. To me, that's a big value for these two boards to be able to get along and do good stuff. The county, the schools. We'll add a couple of things that we've talked about that wasn't highlighted at our last meeting. That's a couple things. One, the above LRE ask needs to have some rules, I think. And that to ask for money above the LRE or RLE, however we're supposed to say it, it has to fit the category. It can't just be, this year we're gonna put propane in it, next year we're gonna put school feeding in it. It seems like we should be able to put a system in which everybody understands if there's money that goes in the above ask, there's a reason why it's going in. And we asked the school board, if teacher pay is your priority number one, build your budget around it, because that's priority and it should be. And let us argue over the other stuff. So we came up with this idea of a capital improvement plan that we do invest in our schools, but it has to fit a criteria. And that's capital improvement. It's infrastructure, repairs, vehicles, it's, the stuff that's hard for the school to be able to do that we can and should be able to help with. The turf field is a sticking point for a lot of people, and I get that. I'm in favor of the turf field, but I'm also in favor of the school taking care of its immediate needs first. And so what we discussed about in that meeting is if the school would take care of their infrastructure, we would do our part to support the rest of their ask. And so I believe the school board came out and said they're gonna spend the money to put the roof on the Cape Center. Well, to me, that's a show of good faith that they're taking care of the stuff that they need to take care of, and I believe it's our duty to help where we can as we can. An AstroTurf field in the middle of the town is, you want to talk about how many people will get to use that service? Not too many, unless we partner as a county and a school system to be able to expand our recreation. So for example, if we're gonna put whatever the number was, John, that we came up that night, and we had money in that capital improvement fund for a roof on the Cape Center. If the school is gonna pay for that out of their money, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't be supportive of the athletic field. And that is a small piece of real estate in this county that can get a lot of people wound up about it for and against. I think it would be a benefit to the county. The county has a grant to pay for mostly the whole thing. And if the school board so chooses to use that grant to cover necessities like a roof on the Cape Center, I think this board ought to be favorable and support them the best we can.
I guess Chair gets to have the word every once in a while. My issue is, and my wife was a school teacher for 31 years. Our son went up through the Grayson County school system, was educated already, graduated, got a good education. I've totally supported, our schools through the years, and I do now. My issue is, my district, I think, they've elected me to be accountable for, the money that we spend. It's a long way from 1.75 from 1.1, and I don't really know why that increase. All I'm asking for is to give me the ability to be accountable to the citizens in my district. When they ask why that funding is necessary and what it's being used for. I know we want the best for our kids. We want to support them with the best education, the best facilities. Me and my wife worked with the Freeze Neighborhood Academy, Freeze Middle School, for a couple years with a grant program, and it's an after-school program. I was embarrassed to use that facility with a lot of the kids because the rundown and the bad situation. So I know what You know, it's important to have good facilities to take the kids to you know, to have the programs and stuff. If we could just have a working list, you know, with CIP projects that are planned, to where there's some accountability, to where I can present that to the people I represent. I have no issue with funding the school system with what they need. What I do have issue is with fluff put in it that doesn't, you know, that we can't explain. We've heard from the school board about, on numerous occasions, when we have our joint meetings, you know, about the water pipes in the middle school is one example. I hate to keep going back to that, but at one time I heard it cost approximately $50,000 to correct the issues with the water pipes. I've been on this board, this is going into my 7th year, and if I'm wrong, somebody tell me, but I don't think those water pipes or that issue's been addressed. You know, the AstroTurf football field, you know, that's fine, but it's like putting icing, well, icing on, well, we got you, all right. So, let's fix what's wrong, and then we go, you know, for the other things. I mean, I think we got a certain percentage, and as far as I know, I've sit in, I don't know if it was special, you know, just a special occasion or what, but I've sit in Aunt B's and watched Sandlot football teams play on that athletic field. Tell me if I'm wrong. So I know there's already an association with the rec park and the school system in using that facility. So I don't think we're opening up this is not a new thing. Sure, we need the youth programs that come through the rec are our future athletes that participate, you know, in the scholastic, you know, in their schools. But just give me a list of what you know needs to be done, and we do it. And there's no guesswork about it. It's out front. It's, you know, we're accountable for it, and that's all I'm asking. I love the teachers. I live with one.
Well,
Formerly.
what, along the lines, if you're done, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I am.
The relationship that you referred to with the schools and the recreation, you're 100% right. That's been going on. At least I know since Mr. Wilmore's been there, because as a volunteer coach, and we had kids at Highlands. You know, a couple of rec directors back, we had kids working or playing at Highlands. We utilized that gym. So that's a really nice gym for folks that don't know. We utilized Fairview School. We had to move the stuff because they use it as a cafeteria too, but it's also a good gym in there with an old-fashioned wood floor. We utilized that. And anytime, I'm pretty certain anytime the rec department needs anything from Mr. Whitmore, he's more than obliging and accommodating. I mean, more so probably than any superintendent that I worked with as when I worked at the rec department. They even let them use their call system. There's never question. And no matter what the relationship that I saw with the county and the schools, no matter how strained that got at times, he always made for the kids because those are his same kids too. So I concur on that. I guess that my thing is we've got several items here on this list. And they asked, you know, they had their original ask, and then or you guys have worked with them to break that down. It looks pretty comprehensive here, but is this, I guess the on line 735 technology is in green. What's can you help me out with that, Lisa? What is that referencing? The 1.1, or is it just green on?
There's no ask in the technology line from their budget.
Right, they didn't ask, but it's, we're recommending it, so what is that? See here?
Yeah, I see it. I don't know.
What line are you?
I'm on line 735.
Oh, is that line, sir?
Okay, yeah.
Well, on mine it has 1.1 in green, is mine old, am I looking at old?
Yes, you are looking at
So there's
old.
nothing on that line now?
No, sir.
So, even though you've worked with the administration and the other board members to come to this agreement, in all actuality, we have a required local effort. And then anything that we do above that is RLE.
It's discretionary.
So this, what does that come to? What is that figure?
The above,
Yeah, the
It's-
total with the
So,
1.75. We're back to
if I may, the $600,000 that is on the other page that for us to work with, this is 1.1, the original ask is in the budget. The $600,000 from 1.1 to 1.7 is in that other sheet that we
And I think that's what the school board passed, was a 1.75 ask.
yes.
That's not what we received at the joint
At
meeting.
the joint meeting, we received 1.1 above
Right.
ask. They did, go back, work that over. Their second ask, and what is approved by the school board is, as indicated here, 1.75 on the screen.
Okay. So we're getting to the same thing, we just got it wrote down here. Okay. And the teachers are still gonna get the raise.
Teachers are still gonna get.
They moved that
They
one
moved
through.
that completely out of the,
Okay. So,
So the discussion that we had was based on what their final ask was, with an understanding that, we can do some things and we might not be able to do some things, but it was based on that 1.8, 1.75. And then we just had the discussion, okay, what do you really need to do? What can we do this year? What can we not do? And just there's acknowledgement across the board that the Parks and Rec has got a good relationship with the school system. I don't mean to imply there's anything else. But I think there's other opportunities.
Right.
I think there's other things that can be done down there, even on the tourism side. If they end up doing that field, you're not gonna wear that field out from playing on. It's gonna wear out, it'll have to be replaced. We need to go into this eyes wide open. When it has to be replaced in 10 to 12 years, the
8 to
county
10 or
owns it.
something like that.
Yeah, the county owns that, okay, and that's a big chunk of money. So that needs to be figured into the discussion. But for the discussion we had, the effort to get something on the table that, in my view, solved a couple things. One, it funded a CIP of some level, It got them to address more of their critical infrastructure needs than they had planned. And it funded the things that they identified, at least those two board members identified, were critical and above RLE funding, which was the bus, the maintenance vehicle, the food, and the operations and maintenance. Did I have that about right? So, again, 4 people in a room had no power, all right? We just had an agreement on this is a proposal on what they had asked versus as we try to figure out what we can do.
so, Mr. Chair, I was kind of following along your same line. Were you asking for just an itemized list of?
Yeah, what you going, projects? What have you built into these projects?
A little more specifics than what we're
More
looking at.
specifics. I mean,
Yeah, I'm
it's
okay
easy
with
to
that
just.
too. I'm with you on that. I'm just not sure how far we can take that as a separate board. But if that's well within the guidelines and the rules, I'm with you.
Well, I mean, I think that's why it was set up that way the school board knows their needs and we're in the appropriation or the funding for it, so we're supposed to, I guess it's like a safety net to make sure that we're being frugal with the citizens' money. There again, I'm not, in no way anti-school. I mean, several of those that work in the system, I consider them great friends and stuff, and I want to see our school system prosper, because I know it's an economic driver to have a healthy school system. That if you're going to entice people to come here to do business, or locate their families here, to do anything like that. But just to have some clarification. I know, not to bring my family in, but my son is working with the Montgomery County school system, and they use they're responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of all the school buildings, and they've borrowed from Richmond school system and then they're talking about more buildings than what we got with as few buildings we have. I don't see how it would. This program goes through, assesses the need for, say, flooring. That needs to be replaced in 2 years, and it even goes into projecting inflation cost. And why can't we, at least have something like that to where we have a projection, or know what we got ahead of us. What are their goals in whatever buildings that may have issues? Are they thinking about potentially down the line that this building goes beyond its value, and you're thinking of construction, whatever. But to use just a simple software program or something like that goes through and does assessments where they get, our procurement, is that going on, or are we just, I'm not trying to do their job for them, but it is state mandates, and we need to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. Just a little effort.
One of the, if I may, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I don't think and Supervisor Anderson, this wasn't an agreement that we had. These meetings have just been an attempt for me to better understand how the school board works and how this works. And they've been very, very fruitful for me. But something that came out of that meeting that I've done a poor job, and I won't say Supervisor Fan's done a poor job, he's not done yet maybe, but is for money above the required local effort to put a system in place, just like you're saying. There has to be some fences, some guidelines around money above required local effort that can even be put in that category, and to put some definitions of what can go in the RLE. And I think that would go a long ways to answering your question. Certainly go a long ways to mine. That it seems like the hatred or whatever, the disagreements that come between these two boards, is there is a total lack of understanding of why the school board went on for years and years and years to get $300,000 a year above required local effort to, in the past 7 years, 1.1 to 1.7. And why? How does that happen when our population is declining? There's not as many kids. So, and you ask, can a board do that? This board can absolutely not fund anything above required local effort. It is discretionary funding. The answer could be no to zero ask.
Correct.
I don't think that's the right way to go with this.
No, and I'm not advocating, for that.
But I also think there has to be some guidelines as to what can be in the over the ask. For example, last year the request was $1.3 million, and they got $300,000, and somehow or another we still graduated students. So it wasn't, whatever the above ask wasn't absolutely necessary to carry on operations. That being said, I don't want to do the school board's job. That's their job. And when the school board comes and has an ask to the board, I think there's been a lot of faith lost in the ask is accurate. And so I'm just kind of at the point, being not having the history with the board of supervisors and the school board, what can we do to right the ship for everybody to get along? If it costs us a little money to get it right, and we can still get some guardrails of what goes in that above ask, I think it'd be a big win for the county.
Well, I feel like we're on the same page as far as what you're saying, but I would like to just say this, because it's kind of, I guess, a thorn in my idea a little bit. And I don't know if you were here 2015, 2014, back in those days, but I was out there and I was an advocate. I wasn't a member of any board or any elected anything. And I remember we were begging and pleading with the board at that time. You guys weren't, I don't think, at that time either. But just to give you a little background and maybe more some of the history of it.
I was here when
We were asking them, hey, at that time they couldn't afford toilet paper or paper towels or whatever. It was that bad. They were getting ready to lock the schools up. The teachers couldn't get paid. We were meeting with them down at the middle school, and the teachers were crying because they couldn't, they weren't able to make payroll. But somehow we worked through all that. But I'm just saying that just to let you know, when we went to the board, this particular board, back in those days, we were told, we can't tell the school how to spend their money. And at that time, the school was $1 million in the hole. So I think some of that's where it's coming from. So when I say if we're within our bounds of asking them to lay this out, then I think it's good to let them lay it out and tell us how they're spending the above required local.
Well,
as long as we're willing to put our money where our mouth is, and it seems like maybe we're headed that way.
Mr. Chairman, they presented a list of where all of this money came from. So the 1.1 I asked was what you're seeing right here. That's the 1.1. The additional 600 and some odd $1,000, they did have a list, and it was for infrastructure improvement. Now, whether they were allowed to have the list or whatever, but there was a plan behind it. And at least from my perspective, I'm like, this is good.
Sure.
Yeah, and when they went from 1.1 to 1.7, I believe Mr. Shepley, it was clear from Mr. Wilmore, I know we're not going to get all of this.
Right.
But this is everything we need, and there was a list, and that was the repairs that needed to be made at the various. Remember it, and I don't have a copy with me, but once you saw that list, I mean, our first meeting, once they said priority number 1 is teacher pay, and I'm like, well, go get teacher pay. If that's priority number 1, let us figure out how to get the rest of this stuff, the 1.1. And then went to 1.7, and there's a list of this is how we got to 1.7. So my thought process is, let's take that list, and that's the list for above required local effort. I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining it, but I'm just like Mr. Chairman here. You can't run a business without a plan, and you can't just every year come up and say it's 1.1. No, you know what? It's 1.7. I think that's irritating to everybody. So what can we do to help the school board to come up with a plan that would make it a pill so much easier to swallow come budget season? Furthermore, I don't know if we can do this, pull this off, but whatever that capital improvement fund is that we were calling for the school system, dedicated for the school system, I think it's a good idea for this board and that board to meet more than just during budget season. It would give us a chance to review that list of what's on the capital improvement plan. Give us a chance to discuss it instead of having 2 heated meetings once a year. It would give us an opportunity for us to get caught up to speed on them and them to get caught up to speed on us. So that was the mindset behind put the money in a fund. We get a majority vote between the 2 boards.
I think we're on the right track. And as far as what John had highlighted, the partnership with recreation throughout the county, I think that's an excellent idea. I would hope that would be in the back of our minds too, as we think about workforce development. and how we could partner, because we already have these facilities all across, already in place that we could utilize. And you had mentioned, they keep coming back and, I need this or I need that. We're facing that right now in Baywood. We're facing the same thing. Come back and ask. And we have things in place right now we can invest in to do this, to accomplish the same goals.
Couldn't agree with you.
And I just wanted, couldn't fail to mention that. Turn it back to you, Mr. Chair. Before I get on.
We've kind of got off there.
We're gonna have to have another recess if we don't, if we ain't close to the finish line.
All right. So, we'll let her get back in here, and we'll see if there's that much many more cutouts we can discuss, and then everybody go home to your.
While she's not here, this is maybe a process question. We're getting pretty close to having to make a decision on some of these funding lines. How do we see proceeding with approval of the budget based on the discussion we've had in prior meetings, discussions tonight? I'll use the word, I think we've got general consensus on some of these things, but I think we're far apart on some of the other ones. How do you see proceeding in order to get us to the decision? We approved a calendar that's driving us to have to be able to do certain things, and we've got to vote on some stuff at some point. So the question is, do we, at the next meeting, do we proceed by a big line item and say this is, do we agree or no, and then go through each line item and vote? That's different than how we've done it, but given the challenges, how do you see that playing out?
Well, Lisa and Mitch, you guys chime in if you want to add anything to this, but I think there's like 3 or 4 things that you guys, that are big picture in the budget that we need to know what you want to do, like the real estate. What do you want to do on the real estate tax? If you give us the parameters within which we can operate, we can come back to you and say, okay, we gave you we showed you the list of what we think we could cut in order to make it happen. And we can come back with a balanced budget based on what we think out of that list is doable for us. So if we can get that, what do you all think?
Am I correct in saying that on May 24th, we'll have to approve the school budget?
Yes.
26.
Well, okay, 26, whatever. We have to agree on the numbers.
Yes, we may.
So that night we will. So as regard to the rest of the budget, are we gonna vote based on department? Because there's some things here, like you said, we have a consensus, some things we don't. And I know the school board was bad for this at times, just lumping everything in. So you had to vote no if there was 2 items that you just really didn't like. And then there was things you did like that you couldn't support because it was lumped in. So if we can break it down somehow in those departments and then maybe have those discussions on those votes, I would be in favor of that.
Supervisor Anderson, would it help to just take that list after you've decided on what the real estate tax and
when you talk about are you talking about the levy? When we decide, because we're working off the 56, we haven't really. Yeah.
Right. And we could just take that, once we know what we have to do as far as the total number we need to cut, then we could come back in here and show you that list again that we have. You could have a chance to take a look at it and see what you felt comfortable in, and look at the rest of the budget and see if there are things that we didn't put on that list that you'd like to talk to us about. Could you cut this, or could you cut that? And that we need to be able to react to your recommendations to us in that meeting and get it done.
So in regard to that, we're talking about right now we're working on 56 cents. Is that what we're working?
That's what we're working on, but I have, Mr. Chair, I have a point after you guys are finished.
Okay, so the 56 cents, and now is 2 cents of that for Baywood again next year as it was this past year? So that's in a different breakdown, the Baywood?
That is in these talking points as it can be removed. because ARPA dollars can be used for that particular project.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, quick question. Balanced budget, 56 cent, minus these outliers that we can. Within the overall budget, how much is there ARPA money or COVID money in that budget?
No,
And how much total dollars of COVID-related ARPA money, whatever ESSER money, how much money does the county have in those funds?
currently we have 1.5 million, by the end of June, we'll have another 1.5 million. I think the total is maybe 3.2 million is what the county, is allocated to.
And if I may ask another question, our above, our 20% in the general fund, if we were at 18% where they recommend us be, how many dollars is that? Two.
3 million.
It's actually at 22 right now. 22.
It's at 22%. The recommendation is to be at 18%, but they hurt us a bit.
The worst you want to go is 15. Start to get worried with 15.
So in the budget is just our revenue, not counting the overage in our general fund or the ESSER money.
First thing in the morning.
I mean, I'm gonna have to have somebody tell me exactly what those are. So there's $5.7 million somewhere in the county budget.
In the funds.
In the funds, that if we have a balanced budget of 5.6 and there's 2.38 that's still not being taken care of, potentially, that we could agree to every bit of that 2.38 and it can be covered out of ARPA money and the general fund overage.
Yes, it could.
But the only thing that what we were talking as a group about is making sure we don't have ongoing operational expenses that are tied to ARPA that make it appear as if everything's cool, you're good for the future, and then next year you get a surprise.
Exactly.
You don't have that.
Exactly. So the answer is yes, but I
Can be.
hesitate to put any kind of
Sure, I get it. I get it. Theoretically.
If, and any kind of effect on the credit rating?
Not at 22.
So are we also, we had the local request, if we have, I don't know if local support from the request for those, which came in at $123,080, and you folks recommended $108,000.
That is negotiable.
Yeah, is this the appropriate time that we take a look at pulling, maybe discussing some of those? Like, for example,
Can you click on that local support?
Sure. Sorry, it's a little slow.
some of those folks, some of those folks, I know come before us and make their presentations, but if I mean, there's several things that we could go down through here, but that I think we need to maybe consider. Chamber of Commerce, $8,500. I'm not sure. I don't know of any events that the Chamber of Commerce has had in Grayson County. I know they do some stuff in the City of Gaylights. I think that would be something we might should take a look at. The Arts Council, another $4,000. Chestnut Creek School, $4,000. The Historical Society, is that at the old courthouse here, or is that? Yeah. Okay. I mean, those are some things we might be able to look at as far as fluff. In Grayson Land Care, what do we get from them?
These are supporting different nonprofit organizations throughout the county. It's not what we get from them, it's how we can help serve the community.
Okay. I just think those are some things maybe we could look at. That probably comes to around 20-some thousand, but in the grand scheme of things, that would.
Sure. One thing that we do, our membership with the Chamber of Commerce, I want to point out, that does give our employees extra life insurance for free. Well, for our membership for the Twain County Chamber of Commerce, each of our employees receive $10,000 life insurance for themselves and $5,000 for each dependent, whether or not they're covered by the county's
Right.
insurance. So that is a value add.
For 8,500.
Yes. So that pays for itself well over, and we have had the occasion for 3 employees to use that.
I guess my take on the local support stuff, it's some of the best money I think we spend. It's taxpayer money from a lot of these folks live in the county, and we're giving it back to them to do things. I think, Grayson Land Care, for example, runs the free market out here off of 21, and I tell you, that place swamped and does a lot of good things, helps a lot of good people, as an example.
Work with the county fair.
And they do the county fair, help there too. So I just think for farmers market, that was one example, river cleanup. But for $108,000, I know it's $108,000, but it seems to me, I think we get way more back in return when we support these organizations out there.
Staff have anything else?
I do have one more point.
Yes, ma'am.
As we prepare to advertise, and this advertisement has to go to the paper. Quickly, right, Ms. Osborne? We need to know the levy number. So are you comfortable with 56? Do you want to come to 55? Do you want to go all the way to 52? That has to be advertised as to what the levy rate will be.
I thought that the whole point of having the hearing was for people to for the people to make an argument on the levy. If we already said it, what's the point of having it?
No, we have to advertise what we think it should be.
Okay, guesstimate.
Yes.
I think we're guessing at what we're at, I guess, anyway.
Sounds like it.
56 cents.
We were scheduled for 2 cent increase, so we're different for walking backwards. I
would like to point out that
I guess
2%
if the
increase was on
big-
the old, that was on the old
Financial.
forecast. With a lot more. It's worth noting.
I personally think it's pretty encouraging that we can step back the levy, still fund the county with a balanced budget, and do some pretty amazing stuff that has not been able to be done in a long time in this county. And I'm certainly not in favor of going up on the levy. I think if we can go down and still be able to generate enough revenue and do this kind of good work, 56 seems to be a pretty good number to me.
Where I sit on the whole thing is strategic flexibility. As we've heard a lot about tonight, we can't predict the future. We can't predict 6 months from now, much less 5 years from now. But what I do appreciate is that even though technically, from 52 to 56 is going to be an increase, it's from last year. There is inflation and other things that we can't control. We can't control what the General Assembly is telling us that we got to do. So there's some of that reality that sets in. But at this point, to echo what Supervisor Ivey was saying, the investments that I think we're making make a lot of sense at this point. Whether it's on the first responder side, on the recreation side, wherever it is, I think there's some things that we're really doing. I do think there's opportunity to probably come down a little bit further on the levy. Based on the amount of money that we're talking about that's floating around out there that's not Grayson County taxpayer derived directly. And so as we get into this public hearing thing and we get into budget closeout, I think there might be some opportunities to adjust that, but we'll see. You know, I think going forward with 56 at this point makes a lot of sense, and then we'll just see how things play out. But I'm encouraged by the investments we're making in EMS, in recreation, in the sheriff's department, and especially the school system. And so we'll see.
I think financial forecast that the board's gonna get here in a few days too.
Yeah, because I worry about 5 years from now when we do the next real estate assessment, you know, and it's not up 14%, it's actually down some other number, you know, that's what I worry about. And if we haven't done something on the economic development side to adjust those things, broadband doesn't get done, and some of these other things that, you know, that continue to face us, that we see the opportunities, that's what worries me. And so I think having some strategic flexibility, which this budget, I think, at least begins to give us, is a good thing.
Whether I'm here or not, you know, in the future, I mean, I have concerns about kicking the can down the road, you know, to somebody else to deal with, but I guess. Go ahead.
I just think that the reaction on the levy should not equal what has happened in the past 2 years. I think what's happened in the past 2 years is once in a lifetime type of stuff. And if we adjust it knee-jerk way too much, then we're just gonna have to readjust it the other way too much again. And so I would urge incremental and not large swings here, because we don't know what 4 to 6 years looks like.
And I concur. I'm not advocating for a knee-jerk reaction. I just, eye on the present, hand on the future, or whatever the analogy is.
Well, I think we can trim the bone a little bit more and maybe, I mean, if we're working at 56 cents when we first talked, we could go either way. I mean, I would like to see it a little less too. With the understanding, that, you know, down the line, we may have to make some hard cuts. We can just be more frugal. And so if the issue at hand is when you put it in the paper, you're gonna say, we're looking at 56 cents, could go either way. Mm-hmm. Is it framed that way, or how?
Yes, it's by code. It's advertised by code, and we just fill in the blanks. Literally.
Well, but I think it's important to point out, what you'll see in the paper doesn't look like that.
No.
Okay? It's a different format.
It is a
So just be aware of it. It's just framed differently the way it goes. But the levy rates, which I think is your question,
Yes.
are clearly articulated.
Yes, and that will be clearly
What the
articulated.
Proposal.
Can I say one thing on that?
You can say 2 things.
I think whatever you advertise in the paper, and then when you ultimately make your decision, it can be lower than what is advertised in the paper, but it cannot be higher than what's advertised in the paper. Is that correct?
You should have told us that.
So if you, 56, you advertise 56, you can't turn around that night and say 59, but you could say 52.
It won't go up less than 1%.
Well, we're talking about
No,
two.
that's not what we're talking about.
We're
It's
talking
what's
about two different
advertised in the
things.
paper.
The levy advertisement is separate than the budget advertisement.
Oh, yeah.
What your public hearing's on,
Right.
you're saying is 56, but it ultimately could be lower if you decide that, but it can't be higher.
Now, what, just for you guys that are new, we'll have the levy advertisement, and that will be mostly words.
when we have a budget advertisement, that will be mostly numbers, but the levy will be reiterated. So whether it's the same or a little lower, that budget, it will be reiterated in the budget advertisement.
So you don't need a motion or anything for the proposed levy, do you? Or are we just?
To be safe, it would be just on the safe side, yes. I'm always gonna err on the conservative
Well,
side.
that's probably smart. So you wanna entertain a motion?
Do we have, I thought we had to have a motion to actually advertise the budget.
You will, and I made some notes on that.
So we'll have to have separate motions.
No.
We can do it all.
You can do it one. You need to have a motion to both advertise the budget, or advertise the levy at 56 cents, and hold a public hearing on, you said, May
Baby's first.
26th. May 26th.
Okay. Chair, to entertain the motion.
Make a motion, we advertise the levy at a proposed rate of 56 cents on on real estate and $2.25 on personal property, for a public hearing to be held on the 26th of May at 6 p.m. Or 5:30. Well, that's on our board meetings, but, you know, our budget workshops, which this is a 5:30
5:30, that's
meeting.
right.
I think
So-
6 would be better for public participation.
Yeah, so 6:05 is in our, but in our board meetings, but for budget workshop, we generally start at 5:30. So, but we can say for that night, it'll be at 6. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah.
Okay. Now I need a
I'll
second.
second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, well, we got to vote first. Okay.
Let's take a roll call.
All right, everyone in favor of the motion as posed before the board? We'll try to repeat all that.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Fan?
Aye.
Mr. Ivy?
Aye.
I also aye.
Sorry to belabor the point, but I think we also have to have a motion to advertise the public hearing that the board has to approve advertising for a public hearing on June 9th. Is that not correct?
That is on the May 12th agenda.
Okay, thank you.
We're good on that.
Thank you for giving me straight.
Okay, now I'm looking for the motion.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Negative.